Chapter 1202. Grandfather, stop talking. I don't want to lock myself up in a secret room every day like you do. Every time I lock myself up, it'll be months or even years. How boring is that? I just like managing the flame mercenaries. Look! The flame mercenaries have become so prosperous and powerful under my management. It's so much more interesting than locking yourself up in a secret room to cultivate all day, Bai Lian said proudly. Her face was brimming with a sense of accomplishment. Bai Hai glared at Bai Lian. He seemed very stern on the surface, but his eyes were filled with unconcealable affection. He said angrily, "You're far too disobedient. What kind of results can you get from wasting so much energy on this mess? If you don't cultivate properly, you'll be wasting all the precious heavenly resources your brother has spent on you. If you really want to help your brother, then cultivate properly. That's much more useful than you taking care of this mess. No matter how well you take care of this mess, it's nowhere near as useful as a holy emperor. With a wave of their hand, they can turn this mess into nothingness." Bai Lian knew that Bai Hai's words made a lot of sense, so she did not refute him. She stuck out her tongue in a naughty manner and pulled Bai Hai's hand affectionately, gently shaking it. She said sweetly, "Great-grandfather, of course I understand what you're saying. Actually, you don't know that I've been cultivating a lot harder than before." "A lot harder? Humph. Don't think that just because I'm not by your side, I don't know what you've been doing all day. There are 24 hours in a day, and you only spend 4 to 6 hours cultivating. You call that hardworking?" Speaking of this, Bai Hai was furious. He really couldn't do anything about this smart and quick-witted great-granddaughter in front of him. On the contrary, she often made him anxious to the point of being badly battered. As the person with the highest authority in the flame mercenaries, Bai Lian actually shrunk her neck in the face of the furious Bai Hai. She then arrived beside Jianqin and looked at Jianqin as if she was asking for help. She said sweetly, "Brother, look at how fierce great-grandfather is. I'm just a girl, yet he's always trying to lock me up in a dark and terrifying underground room. Big brother, I know you love Lianer the most, right? Please persuade great-grandfather." Lianer knows that Big Brother's words are like an imperial edict, more effective than anything else. Even great-grandfather Bai Hai, who flaunts his seniority, doesn't dare to ignore it. "You damn girl." Bai Hai fumed on one side as he pointed at Bai Lian. He was at a loss for words. Jianqin looked at Bai Lian's pitiful appearance lovingly and smiled. "Lian, great-grandfather is right. Becoming stronger is more important than anything else. You should just let go of the miscellaneous matters of the flame mercenaries." "Brother, I understand." Bai Lian clearly listened to Jianqin more. She immediately became docile as soon as Jianqin spoke, but a sliver of craftiness appeared in her eyes. She said, "Brother, if you stay in Flame City, I'll have a lot less to worry about. That way, I'll be able to spend more time on cultivation." Jianqin had no idea whether to laugh or cry as he looked at his sister. He said, "Lian, I really don't have a lot of time. How about this? I'll stay in Flame City for 2 days and guide your cultivation with great-grandfather." Afterwards, Jianqin took out a space ring and handed it to Bai Lian before temporarily staying in Flame City. The space ring contained all the Class 5, 6, and 7 monster cores he had obtained from the Heaven's Incense School. However, all the Class 7 monster cores had been given to Bai Hai for safekeeping. Only the Class 5 and 6 monster cores were given to Honglian to use as she pleased. At this moment, a burly, disheveled man was walking with great difficulty in a desolate wilderness. His hair was disheveled, his clothes were in tatters, and his feet were bare. He seemed like a beggar. On his burly body, there were several hideous and terrifying wounds. From the looks of it, some were caused by the bites of magical beasts, while others were caused by sharp weapons such as swords and sabers. Even though the man seemed to be very heavily injured, his steps were still filled with power. He moved like the wind and seemed completely fine. The disheveled man stopped and took out a map from his bosom to look at it. Then he used his hand to tidy up his messy hair that had already covered his eyes. His eyes, which were as deep as the starry sky, were revealed. "With this speed, I'll be home in another month," the man murmured before putting the map away and continuing on his way. At this moment, a figure flew over from afar and landed beside the man. It was a young man in blue robes. He seemed to be in his 30s and possessed quite the bearing. "Kid, I just went to a city 100 kilometers away and bought a few roasted chickens and some good wine. Let's sit down and have a good meal first." The young man in blue took out 2 roasted chickens from his interspatial ring and tossed one of the roasted chickens to the abject man. The shabby man and the young man were obviously very familiar with each other. Without any pleasantries, he took the roast chicken with one hand and the wine pot with the other. He sat cross-legged on the ground facing the young man and began to eat. "Kid, I can't help but admire your perseverance and stubbornness. There are so many magical beasts that can be used as mounts, but you just don't want them and insist on walking. The Tianyuan continent is so large, so you won't be able to walk from east to west even if you walk for your entire life. Furthermore, your journey home is so long. If I hadn't brought you along on the way, I'm afraid it would have taken you a year or 2 to get here." The young man gulped down the wine and meat as he spoke to the man in a muffled voice. The man swallowed the chicken in his mouth and stared at the young man with his deep, starry eyes. He said seriously, "Senior, all living things are the spirits of all things. The spirits of all things are nurtured by the world, and we humans are the best of the best. As long as the time is right, we will be able to comprehend the truth of the world. This world is wondrous, and the ground that makes up this world is filled with a great and unbelievable power. When you walk on the ground with your feet, you will feel this wondrous power and feel the veins of the ground. You will then comprehend the truth of the world through this wondrous power and veins." "What did you say? There's a great and unbelievable power in the ground. Is there really such a thing? Why can't I feel it?" The young man stood up from the ground and began to pace around with his feet as if he was serious. "Senior, you can't feel it because your opportunity hasn't come yet, or you're missing something," the man said seriously. He did not seem like he was joking at all. The young man laughed and sat down across from the man again. He smiled. "To think that I, Feng Yixiao, am a mighty saint ruler, only a step away from becoming the holy emperor. Yet I'm actually being described by a puny earth saint master in such a place. I really don't know whether to laugh or cry. Kid, you say I'm missing something. So why don't you tell me what I'm missing?" "What you're missing is—" The man sank into his thoughts. After thinking about it seriously for quite a while, he shook his head in confusion. "I don't know what Senior is missing either." "You really are an interesting kid. If it weren't for the fact that I practice a special cultivation technique that allows me to sense whether a person is telling the truth or not, I would definitely think that you are toying with me. Kid, do you know what happens to those who dare to trick me, Feng Yixiao?" Feng Yixiao said, "I can also feel that Senior is a decisive person who kills without hesitation. Your hands are stained with the blood of countless people. Anyone who offends Senior will end up dead without exception," the disheveled man said calmly. "Then you're not afraid of me?" Feng Yixiao looked at the man. The down-and-out man shook his head and said, "The world is heartless, and the spirits of all living things are also heartless when they are born. The so-called 7 emotions and 6 desires are all born after birth. I am following the path of the world, walking a heartless path, walking a path of freedom. Naturally, I have to cut off the 7 emotions and 6 desires that were born after birth. Of course, I am not afraid of death. I have already cut it off. Kid, you sure are strange. I've wandered the Tianyuan continent for over 1,000 years, and I've seen countless people of all shapes and sizes. However, this is the first time I've seen a kid as strange as you. You said that you're walking a heartless path and that you have to sever your emotions and desires. If that's the case, why do you still want to go home? Since you've already severed them, what's the point of going back?" Feng Yixiao asked out of curiosity. I've already severed all my emotions and desires, but I just can't sever the final barrier. The man suddenly became pained. Tears rolled down his cheeks as he sorrowfully said, I can't forget my father, and I can't forget my mother either. My mother only has me as her only son. If she loses me, she'll be in so much pain that she'll wish she was dead. There's also my sister, third brother and fourth brother. I can't forget them, nor do I dare to forget them. I don't want to be a heartless person. I can't sever the final barrier. I can't sever it. I can't sever it. I can't sever it. Towards the end, the man basically roared out. His face was filled with pain. Feng Yixiao stopped eating and drinking. He stared at the man, and only after a long while did he gently sigh. You're walking an unusual path of cultivation. Although I don't know what kind of path it is, I do know that it's extremely cruel. It's not suitable for you right now. If you really can't do it, just take another path. Chapter 1203. Are your feelings reliable? Do you really trust them that much? Feng Yixiao looked at the disheveled man in confusion. In his long memory, this was the first time he had been so interested in a mere Earth Saint Master. However, Feng Yixiao understood that although the disheveled man's strength was nothing special, he really could sense something different about him. Otherwise, with his strength and arrogance, it was impossible for him to become acquainted with a mere Earth Saint Master for no reason. The disheveled man nodded firmly. He said in an unquestionable tone, I trust my feelings very much. Ever since I set foot on this path, my feelings have never been wrong. Anything that I can sense will happen. Oh, since your feelings are so sharp, why don't you try and sense if you'll forget the people you can't forget? Feng Yixiao bit into his roast chicken and said with interest. The disheveled man's expression became very downcast. He didn't even have the slightest appetite. He lowered his head deeply and said in a low voice, I don't dare to think about this problem. I also don't dare to feel the future in this aspect. I'm afraid that something painful will happen. The disheveled man fell silent again. As if he had understood something, he let out a long sigh and said, Severing your emotions and desires is not forcing you to forget. Instead, it's freeing you from them. There won't be any pain during this process. There will only be indifference. Right now, I still haven't severed my emotions, which is why I feel pain. However, when I unknowingly sever them in the future, I won't feel like this anymore. At that time, family will be nothing in my eyes. I'll forget everyone at that time, including my mother. The disheveled man's voice was filled with deep sorrow. He knew extremely well that once he severed his last bit of family, he might reach a supreme realm of cultivation, and his strength would increase drastically. However, he would abandon all his emotions at the same time. He didn't want to be like this. He would rather be an ordinary mortal than abandon his feelings for his biological parents. However, he had no choice at all. Right now, his fate seemed to have been arranged by the heavens. It could not be stopped as he wished. He could only continue on this path. Feng Yixiao tossed the boneless roast chicken far away before gulping down all the alcohol in his flask. Afterward, he stood up and said, Kid, since you're so sad, let's not talk about this anymore. Look at you. You're a man, yet you're about to cry. You're just like a girl. I just happen to have matters to attend to. I've already wasted quite a lot of time with you, so I can't waste any more time. I have to leave immediately. The disheveled man calmed himself very soon. He stood up and said, Senior, thank you for your help in the past few days. If I have the chance in the future, I'll definitely repay you. Feng Yixiao laughed aloud. Repay? Ha ha ha. I reckon that the next time we meet, you won't even recognize who I am. What's there to repay? Senior, I definitely won't forget you, the disheveled man replied rather awkwardly. Kid, don't you want to go to the kingdom of Jessen? There's still over 100,000 kilometers to the kingdom of Jessen. With your legs, it'll probably take you a few years. I just happen to be going in the same direction as you, so I'll take you along. Although I can't take you to the kingdom of Jessen, I can save you some time at the very least, Feng Yixiao said in an extremely straightforward manner. It was definitely a great honor for a puny Earth Saint Master to receive the assistance of a ninth heavenly layer Saint Ruler. However, the disheveled man behaved very normally. He only thanked Feng Yixiao with a smile. He was extremely calm and did not become excited at all. Feng Yixiao had already become accustomed to the disheveled man's calmness, so he said nothing more. He grabbed the disheveled man by the shoulder and quickly left. After Feng Yixiao's departure, an extremely ordinary-looking, white-robed, middle-aged man silently appeared where they had been standing. He stared in the direction Feng Yixiao had left in a daze and murmured, "Changyang, who has already reached the final step of the first layer of freedom. He's only missing the final step." After leaving the Pure Heart Pavilion, Changyang, who has experienced a lot along the way. He's gone through trials of life and death and comprehended the various aspects of life, which has allowed him to take a huge step forward in the first layer of freedom. It's just a pity that Feng Yixiao suddenly appeared along the way. Not only did he fail to help Changyang, but he even delayed everything. Otherwise, Changyang probably would have been able to sever his last worries on his way home. Feng Yixiao's actions have made Changyang return home early, so I wonder if anything will happen. A mighty Saint Ruler is actually interested in a puny Earth Saint Master. Sai, is this the will of the heavens? Even the heavens want to arrange for Changyang to meet his family at such a crucial moment. Feng Yixiao used spatial force to travel. His body seemed to have fused with space, completely fusing with it. Although he moved extremely quickly, he did not encounter any resistance from the air, so he flew silently. The disheveled man with Feng Yixiao could only see the blurry scenery below him. When they flew over some cities, they could not even make out what the cities looked like. In less than half a day, Feng Yixiao had crossed several tens of thousand kilometers with his strength as a ninth heavenly layer Saint Ruler. In the end, he stopped 10 kilometers away from a small town. "Kid, this is as far as I can send you. You'll have to rely on yourself for the rest of the journey. Take these purple coins and buy some things you need along the way," Feng Yixiao said in a carefree and generous manner. He tossed a spatial ring in his hand to the bedraggled man. "Senior, I don't need. Kid, there's no reason for me to take back what I've given away. Are you looking down on what I've given away?" Feng Yixiao narrowed his eyes and said angrily. The disheveled man was helpless. He could only accept the space ring obediently. Feng Yixiao patted the disheveled man's shoulder and said, "Kid, take care of yourself in the future. I hope you'll still remember me the next time we meet." With that, Feng Yixiao flew off before the disheveled man could reply. "Senior, I'll definitely remember you the next time we meet," the disheveled man called out in the direction Feng Yixiao had disappeared in. The disheveled man did not leave. Instead, he stood where he was and silently stared in the direction Feng Yixiao had left in. He had only met Feng Yixiao by chance, yet Feng Yixiao had actually helped him so much selflessly despite being a Saint Ruler. This touched him deeply. During the time he spent with Feng Yixiao, he could clearly sense Feng Yixiao's sincerity towards him. There was definitely no other reason behind it. Suddenly, the disheveled man's eyes darkened. They were pitch black without any light at all. It felt like a vast, boundless space of darkness. If he looked into them, he would feel like his soul would be sucked in. But in the next moment, specks of weak light suddenly appeared in the disheveled man's dark eyes. They flickered, as dazzling as the stars in the night sky. His eyes seemed to hide another space, another universe. Suddenly, the disheveled man's burly body jerked violently. He returned to his senses in a single instant, and his eyes immediately returned to normal. He cried out, "Oh no, Senior will definitely die this time. There's no chance for him to survive." With that, the disheveled man began to run in the direction Feng Yixiao had left in. A mysterious force seemed to surge out of the ground with every step he took, pushing him forward quickly. Although he was only an Earth Saint Master, he was actually faster than Heaven Saint Masters who could fly. Even wind-attributed six-cycle heaven Saint Masters could not compare to him in terms of speed. In the Flame Mercenaries, Jian Chen, Yu Yu, Bai Lian, and Bai Hai all sat at the table and ate together. Even Du Gufeng, who served in the Flame Mercenaries, was present. Although Du Gufeng had been subdued by Jian Chen in the training space of Mercenary City, Jian Chen had always treated him like a brother. He had never treated him as an outsider. In reality, Du Gufeng had not let down Jian Chen. He had set aside his cultivation to serve as the disciplinary elder of the Flame Mercenaries, dedicating himself to the development of the Flame Mercenaries. Du Gufeng was a man of few words. Therefore, he rarely spoke at the table. His entire person carried a bit of coldness. Du Gufeng, it's really been hard on you in the past few years. You've even set aside your cultivation for the development of the Flame Mercenaries. If you want to set aside everything, you can find Bai Lian at any time. After all, your own cultivation is the most important thing. Great strength is even more useful than authority, Jian Chen sincerely said. In his eyes, authority was not important. Even if you became the king of a kingdom, you would still have to act submissively before a saint ruler. Even the Qin Empire, one of the 8 great kingdoms, was nothing before an expert like the Holy Emperor. With a wave of his hand, many years of hard work would have been for naught. The Flame Mercenaries have basically stabilized now. I'll spend another 2 years to stabilize it, and after that, I'll set aside everything and focus on cultivation, Du Gufeng said emotionlessly. His voice was rather cold. Chapter 1204. A sliver of desire finally appeared in Du Gufeng's eyes. He yearned to reach the same level as the Holy Emperor. Jian Chen's words had tempted him very much. It's a pity that Ken is out on a mission. Otherwise, there would be another person at the table. Speaking of which, Ken should be the captain of the Flame Mercenaries, Jian Chen said with some regret. Although Ken's father, Kendall, founded the Flame Mercenaries, Ken is still weak. It'll be difficult for him to convince the others if he becomes the captain. At the same time, it might cause the Flame Mercenaries to disband, Du Gufeng said without any hesitation. Jian Chen did not become angered. He said, "Let's let Ken grow up first. Once he has enough strength in the future, I'll let him take over as captain. That way, he'll inherit his father's legacy. At the same time, it'll be an explanation to Uncle Kendall." With that, Jian Chen's eyes narrowed. He turned his head toward the east. His gaze seemed to be able to pierce through the obstructions of the buildings and see the world outside. Although he was in the room, nothing that happened outside could escape his eyes. Someone has come with ill intentions. "Looks like I've come at the right time," Jian Chen softly murmured to himself as he slowly put down his cup. "What? Someone's come to make trouble for us?" Bai Lian obviously heard Jian Chen's murmur as well. She was shocked. There was no one on the Tianyuan continent who did not know about the Flame Mercenaries. Ever since the Flame Mercenaries had taken back Flame City from the Flame Extinguishing Alliance, they had established their great strength, making all the large organizations on the continent fear them. Even now, no one dared to provoke the Flame Mercenaries. As a result, Bai Lian even doubted if she had heard correctly when she heard Jian Chen's soft murmur. Bai Hai was also surprised. With the fame of Captain Jian Chen, who would dare to provoke him aside from the 10 protector clans. Moreover, even the 10 protector clans feared Jian Chen very much. Could it be that there's a power even greater than the 10 great guardian families? At this moment, Bai Hai actually had such a strange thought in his mind, but he immediately laughed self-deprecatingly. Suddenly, a tremendous presence descended from the sky, basically enveloping the entire city. The presence possessed the savagery and toughness of a vicious beast. At the same time, there seemed to be the deep howls of wolves. This was the powerful presence of a 9th heavenly layer saint ruler. It immediately suffocated countless mercenaries in the city. Many of them paled and felt like a mountain was pressing down on their chests, suffocating them. The mercenaries were not very powerful. There were only a handful of Heaven Saint Masters, and most of them were not even Earth Saint Masters, so they were unable to resist the presence of a Saint Ruler. A young man who seemed to be in his 30s hovered in the air above Flame City with his arms crossed. His eyes were cold and he was emotionless. He only stared at the city lord's estate below. Who dares to act recklessly in Flame City? State your name. A loud shout rang out from the city lord's residence. Along with the voice, 5 old men shot into the air from different directions. They were as fast as lightning. With a flash, they disappeared without a trace. When they reappeared, they were already in the air, facing off against the young man who had come with ill intentions. The 5 Saint Rulers were all experts who had joined the Flame Mercenaries. They were the only Saint Rulers in the entire city aside from Baihai. The black-robed old man on one side clearly recognized the young man. His eyes narrowed, and his face became rather ugly. He sternly called out, "The greedy king, Feng Yixiao. It's actually you." The young man glared at the old man. He coldly smiled and said, "Gu Tu, I've searched for you for 50 whole years. I never thought that you would actually be hiding in the Flame Mercenaries. This really does surprise me. You managed to escape last time, so I'd like to see where you'll run off to this time." With that, Feng Yixiao's presence skyrocketed. The powerful energy that belonged to a 9th heavenly layer Saint Ruler leaked out from his body, vaguely condensing into a wolf that howled at the sky. Immediately, wild winds began to kick up in the surroundings as the energy of the world surged chaotically in the sky. The 5 Saint Rulers all became extremely stern. Deep fear filled their eyes. They could tell that Feng Yixiao had already reached the peak of the 9th heavenly layer just from his presence. He was a terrifying existence that was half a step away from reaching the level of the Holy Emperor. He was even more powerful than regular 9th heavenly layer Saint Rulers. On the other hand, the strongest among them had only just reached the 5th heavenly layer, while the weakest was only at the 2nd heavenly layer. The difference between them and Feng Yixiao was not small. If they really did fight, they would not be able to defeat Feng Yixiao even if they worked together. Feng Yixiao, this is the campsite of the Flame Mercenaries, and I, Gu Tu, am the great protector of the Flame Mercenaries. I will not tolerate your impudence. Could it be that you dare to offend the Flame Mercenaries and start a war with them? Gu Tu shouted sternly. He had an irreconcilable grievance with Feng Yixiao. 50 years ago he had almost died to Feng Yixiao's hands, but he had only managed to escape in the end. Now that Feng Yixiao had come looking for him. He was even more powerful than 50 years ago. He could not escape even if he wanted to. He could only use the name of the Flame Mercenaries to deter Feng Yixiao. The killing intent in Feng Yixiao's eyes became even heavier. He coldly said, "Gu Tu, this is a personal matter between the two of us. It has nothing to do with the Flame Mercenaries, so don't use the name of the Flame Mercenaries to scare me." Gu Tu laughed aloud. He looked at Feng Yixiao in a mocking manner and said, "It's rumored that the greedy wolf King Feng Yixiao fears nothing and does as he pleases. No one can stop him, and no one can change his mind. Looking at it today, it's just an undeserved reputation. He's actually been frightened by the name of the Flame Mercenaries." Feng Yixiao's gaze became even colder. His face was filled with malice as a powerful killing intent radiated from him at all. Gu Tu's words had infuriated him. Chapter 1205. Feng Yixiao had always been an unruly and prideful person. Coupled with the fact that he was a mighty 9th heavenly layer Saint Ruler, how could he endure the provocation of someone who was as weak as an ant in his eyes? Even though he feared the Flame Mercenaries very much, he could not endure the mockery of an ant. "Gu Tu, do you really think that I'll let you go just because you've joined the Flame Mercenaries? Wrong. You underestimate me far too much. Anyone that I want to kill must die," Feng Yixiao coldly said. Feng Yixiao said coldly. With that, he had already left behind a blur, charging towards Gu Tu with great speed. He arrived beside Gutu in a single instance and extended his right hand towards Gutu's throat. Surging power of God surged from his right hand, and it seemed to have transformed into an extremely sharp wolf claw. Gutu never thought that Feng Yixiao would actually be bold enough to attack him here. He paled in fright as he retreated as quickly as he could, dodging Feng Yixiao's lightning-fast claw with everything he had. The difference in strength between him and Feng Yixiao was just too great. It was not an exaggeration to describe it as a chasm. The only thing Gutu could do was dodge Feng Yixiao's attack. He did not even have the ability to block it. Blood splattered in the air. Even though Gutu had used everything he had, he was still unable to completely dodge Feng Yixiao's attack. His neck had been reduced to a bloody mess by Feng Yixiao's claw, and a large chunk of flesh had been ripped off. It was a terrifying sight. Warm blood spurted from Gutu's neck like a fountain, blooming into a beautiful flower in the air. Gutu held the wound on his neck with one hand as he retreated. His eyes were filled with intense fear. The wound on his neck was fatal to Heaven's Saint Masters, but as a saint ruler, they would not die even if their bodies rotted away as long as their souls remained. Greedy King, why? You're declaring war on the flame mercenaries. The great captain will never let you go. Gutu shouted as he flew backwards in a panic. As his throat had suffered a serious injury, his voice was hoarse. Feng Yixiao remained silent. His face was sunken, filled with coldness and heavy killing intent. With a single movement, he shot past the 4 other saint rulers and pursued Gutu's day. Greedy King, you're too impudent. You actually dare to declare war on the flame mercenaries. For great protectors, please immediately teach the Greedy King a lesson and protect the authority of the flame mercenaries. The dignity and honor of our flame mercenaries cannot be trampled upon by the Greedy King in such an unbridled manner. Otherwise, once the captain blames us, none of us will be able to bear the consequences. Gutu anxiously called out. He wanted to persuade the 4 other saint rulers to keep the king of greed busy. The 4 saint rulers immediately shivered inside when they heard the word captain. The light in their eyes began to flicker as they became hesitant. They all felt fear and respect for the captain of the flame mercenaries, who had reached the level of the Holy Emperor. If the captain blames them, they really would not be able to bear the consequences. Perhaps because he sensed the change in their minds, Feng Yixiao suddenly turned around and glanced at them coldly. The 4 saint rulers felt their hearts skip a beat when they saw that glance. They trembled all over. At that moment, the 4 of them actually felt like they were suffocating, which made them feel extremely shocked. This was not the first time the 4 of them had experienced something like this. However, only the Holy Emperor could make them feel so fearful, yet they could actually feel it from Feng Yixiao right now. The 4 of them found it rather unbelievable. This greedy King Feng Yixiao should be able to successfully break through to the level of the Holy Emperor very soon. At this moment, the 4 of them thought the same thing at the same time. They also felt some envy. 4 protectors, listen up. This is a personal enmity between me and Gutu's day. It has nothing to do with you. If you interfere, then don't blame me for not giving the flame mercenaries any face. Feng Yixiao said coldly before continuing his pursuit of Gutu's day. The 4 protectors all remained where they were. They did not move no matter how Gutu tried to incite them. They feared Feng Yixiao's strength, and since he had already said something like that, they would not be stupid enough to seek their own deaths. Gutu was unable to fight back at all before Feng Yixiao. He was covered in wounds now. Aside from the wound on his neck, Feng Yixiao had even scratched a fist-sized hole in his chest. His heart had already disappeared, reduced to mush in Feng Yixiao's hands. He had lost one of his arms, so he was in an extremely horrible state. Gutu, I'd like to see how you'll escape this time. But don't worry, I won't kill you immediately. I'll torture you viciously, and then you'll die in excruciating pain. Feng Yixiao sneered. His right hand seemed to have transformed into a sharp wolf's claw as it constantly swept across Gutu's body, causing chunks of flesh and blood to fly into the air. Gutu was like a lamb waiting to be slaughtered. He could not help but shriek out miserably from the intense pain. He hissed, "Greedy king, the captain won't spare you. If you kill me today, you'll end up like me before long. I'll be waiting for you in hell." With that, Gutu produced another grunt. A piece of flesh on his waist had been ripped off by Feng Yixiao. "Stop! How can I let you humiliate a great protector of the flame mercenaries like this?" An old but loud voice suddenly rang out from the city lord's estate. Afterward, an old man furiously flew into the sky. He radiated with a heavy and powerful presence. Feng Yixiao glanced at Bai Hai, who had flown up from below. He said, "Another 7th heavenly layer Saint Ruler has come, but you still can't stop me. Gutu, I originally wanted you to live a little longer, but it looks like I have no choice but to finish you off immediately to avoid unnecessary trouble." Feng Yixiao stopped tormenting Gutu's day. With a thought, the space around Gutu suddenly froze, trapping his bloodied body. He was unable to move at all. This was a spatial technique used by a 9th heavenly layer Saint Ruler. The frozen space was so tough that even Gutu needed to use his full strength to break through it several times in his peak condition. Now that he was heavily injured, he could not even use 30% of his strength, so he was helpless against the frozen space. All he could do was watch as the murderous, greedy king rapidly approached him. "Bai Hai, save me!" Gutu cried out for help in a panic. He was filled with fear before the threat of death. Unfortunately, as soon as he had finished speaking, Feng Yixiao's right hand had already stabbed deeply into his head. Gutu suddenly froze before becoming limp, as if he had lost all his strength. His widened eyes rapidly lost their luster as well. His soul was unable to escape in time, having been wiped out by greedy king. "How dare you? Sir, you're the first person who dares to kill a great protector of the flame mercenaries so openly." Bai Hai roared out. He was utterly furious. At the same time, a huge sword that was as wide as a palm appeared in his hand. Pure and powerful, water-attributed, saint force coiled around the huge sword. Terrifying pulses of energy caused the surrounding space to tremble slightly, beginning to distort. Fourth move of the traceless water, Soul Chase. Bai Hai also knew that Feng Yixiao was very powerful, so he bellowed out and directly used a saint tier battle skill. Immediately, a tremendous pressure descended from the sky, crushing down on Feng Yixiao like an invisible mountain. The tremendous pressure caused Feng Yixiao's body to sink slightly in the air. The battle skills of the Bai family had a total of 4 moves, which were the human tier, earth tier, heaven tier, and saint tier. The 4th saint tier battle skill was split into 2 moves. The first was an offensive move, Soul Chase, while the second was an escape technique, Absolute Rebirth. Bai Hai was completely enveloped by a dense layer of blue light. He raised his huge sword high into the air before slashing out with lightning-like speed. The strike easily ripped through space, causing the space before him to rip apart like a piece of paper. It extended toward Feng Yixiao at an unbelievable speed. If one were to sense it carefully, it would not be difficult to discover that there was an indiscernible ripple of energy hidden within the rapidly expanding space. It was the ripple of energy that caused space to constantly rip apart. Although it did not create an earth-shaking disturbance, its great power was clearly visible. Feng Yixiao pulled his right hand out of Gutu's head. He did not even glance at Gutu's corpse, allowing it to fall to the ground. He said, "I never thought you would know a saint tier battle skill as well. It really is powerful. With your strength at the 7th heavenly layer, it's more than enough to deal with regular 9th heavenly layer experts. Unfortunately, you've encountered me, the avaricious king, Feng Yixiao." The avaricious king remained composed against by high saint tier battle skill. He directly threw out a punch, and surging energy surged out from his fist. It immediately condensed into a wolf that collided with Baihai's Saint Tier battle skill. The energy wolf collided with the sword wave that could easily cut through space. The two of them actually disappeared without a sound. They didn't even cause any ripples. They turned back into waves of heaven and earth yuan qi and dissipated between heaven and earth. Chapter 1206. Baihai's Saint Tier battle skill had been easily nullified by Feng Yixiao. Not only had Baihai been rendered speechless by such a shocking scene, but even the 4 other saint rulers who had joined the flame mercenaries revealed disbelief. They knew that Feng Yixiao was extremely powerful. Even if the 4 of them worked together, they would not be his opponent. However, Baihai was a 7th heavenly layer saint ruler after all. Although he was not Feng Yixiao's opponent, he had closed the gap by a lot. Coupled with Baihai's peerless Saint Tier battle skill, even a peak expert who was about to reach the level of Holy Emperor would pose a certain threat to him. However, Feng Yixiao had actually nullified Baihai's Saint Tier battle skill with a casual strike. Such a terrifying ability deeply shocked everyone present. This was because, in their opinion, only a supreme expert who had reached the level of Holy Emperor could nullify the Saint Tier battle skill of a 7th heavenly layer saint ruler so effortlessly. Feng Yixiao did not do anything else. He glanced at Baihai indifferently and said, "Since my enemy is dead, it's time for me to bid farewell." With that, Feng Yixiao turned around and flew off into the distance. He had heard of the name of the Flame Mercenaries, so he did not want to completely offend such a powerful organization. However, at this moment, Feng Yixiao suddenly froze. He came to a halt in the air as well. His composed face became extremely stern at that moment, and he suddenly turned around. His eyes shone with a shocking light as he looked in the direction of the city lord's estate. A meter-long strand of black sword qi suddenly appeared, shooting towards Feng Yixiao with lightning-like speed. The sword qi was like a streak of light as it gave off a shocking presence. A presence filled with violence and destruction radiated from the sword qi, causing space to crack and the energy of the world to tremble as if it was afraid. It shocked the saint rulers and Feng Yixiao to the point of shivering. Feng Yixiao became extremely stern. Due to the special nature of his cultivation method, he possessed sharpness and intuition far greater than ordinary people. He could sense the threat of death from the black sword qi that had shot out from the city lord's estate. The pressing presence and cold killing intent from the sword qi made him feel suffocated. The black sword qi shot over extremely quickly. It was so fast that Feng Yixiao did not even have the ability to dodge. It pierced through his chest like it was tofu, leaving behind a fist-sized hole. A grunt rang out from Feng Yixiao's throat. He vomited a large mouthful of blood, which turned into a bloody mist that drifted down from the sky. His face became extremely pale at that moment, and he could no longer maintain the ability to hover. He plummeted from the sky, quickly smashing towards the ground. Bang! With a thud, Feng Yixiao heavily smashed into the ground, creating a deep pit in the mud that was not very tough. Dust was kicked into the air. The saint rulers of the Flame Mercenaries were all stunned by this sudden development. None of them had thought that the mighty Feng Yixiao would be so fragile before the sword qi. "Captain! It's Captain! The captain has returned!" Very soon, a saint ruler thought of something and cried out in joy. Only Captain Jianchen possesses that terrifying presence filled with violence and destruction on the Tian Yuan continent. Fantastic! I never thought that Captain Jianchen would actually return at such a crucial moment. With Captain Jianchen here, this Feng Yixiao is dead for sure. Our flame mercenaries are not so easy to bully. Other than Baihai, the 4 other saint rulers were all overjoyed. Although they had not seen Jianchen, they were extremely familiar with the chaotic force that Jianchen used. This was because the chaotic force that had never appeared on the Tian Yuan continent before had already become a symbol of Jianchen's identity. No one recognized the chaotic force. However, The unique presence of the chaotic force had already been recognized by many experts on the Tianyuan continent. Outside the city, Feng Yixiao crawled out of the pit with great difficulty. He knelt on the ground with a pale face as his body gently trembled uncontrollably. His face was filled with pain as blood spurted from the wound on his chest like a fountain, dyeing the ground red. Feng Yixiao was in excruciating pain. When the sword qi had passed through his chest, a small strand of chaotic force had remained in his body, wildly destroying it. His organs and meridians had all been reduced to rags by the chaotic force. Even if Feng Yixiao tried his best to control the energy within him to resist the chaotic force that was wreaking havoc in his body, it was useless. He was unable to stop the chaotic force at all, nor was he able to wipe it out. Jianqin, I never thought that the captain of the Flame Mercenaries would actually be in Flame City today, Feng Yixiao said in a deep voice. He had heard many rumors about Jianqin, so he immediately guessed the identity of the expert who had shot out the black sword qi. A white-robed figure quickly flew toward Feng Yixiao, stopping 3 steps away from him in the end. He was a young man who seemed to be in his 20s. He was brimming with heroic spirit and handsome features. His eyes were cold, and he did not give off the presence of an expert at all. He seemed like an ordinary person. The young man stood with his hands behind his back. He stared at the kneeling Feng Yixiao and said, "You sure are bold to kill people in my Flame Mercenaries as a mere saint ruler." Feng Yixiao raised his head and stared at the young man. The moment he saw the young man's face, his eyes narrowed slightly. Although this was the first time he had seen the young man, he had seen the young man's portrait countless times. "Jianqin, it really is you," Feng Yixiao growled as he sighed inside about his bad luck. Feng Yixiao had dared to come to the Flame Mercenaries alone to kill Gutu because he was certain that the captain of the mercenaries, Jianqin, was not in the city. Coupled with the fact that he had grown tired of roaming the world and was on the verge of breaking through recently, he planned on killing his enemy before going deep into the mountains to cultivate. At that time, even if Jianqin was omnipotent, he would not be able to find him. Chapter 1207. Jianqin, this is a personal enmity between me and Gu Tuesday. It has nothing to do with your Flame Mercenaries. Do you want to interfere with my enmity with Gu Tu? Feng Yixiao growled. Even though he knew that the person before him was an undefeatable expert, Feng Yixiao was not afraid at all. Your enmity with Gu Tu has nothing to do with me, but Gu Tu is a member of the Flame Mercenaries after all. How can I just let someone kill a member of the mercenaries so easily? Moreover, you've killed Gu Tu in front of all the members of the mercenaries, Jianqin said. He spoke in an extremely indifferent tone. Feng Yixiao knew that he was done for today with that. He gritted his teeth and said with some reluctance, "Jianqin, you should have noticed me before I died. With your abilities, you probably discovered me as soon as I arrived. So why didn't you appear before I killed Gu Tu? Why did you wait until I killed Gu Tu before dealing with me?" At this moment, Bai Hai and the 4 other saint rulers arrived behind Jianqin as well. The 4 of them looked at Jianqin with undisguised admiration as well as a sliver of fear. Jianqin no longer glanced at Feng Yixiao. He turned around and made his way toward the city. He indifferently said, "Execute him on the spot." "Yes, Captain." The 4 saint rulers all responded. Excitement filled their eyes. Killing a 9th heavenly layer saint ruler was definitely a great stimulation to them, as well as a great honor. Bai Hai glanced at the kneeling Feng Yixiao with some pity. He gently shook his head before turning around and making his way toward the city as well. Bai Hai found it extremely regretful that an expert who was about to break through to the level of Holy Emperor would die here. The Holy Emperor was a supreme realm that Bai Hai had yearned to reach for a very long time. The 4 saint rulers of the Flame Mercenaries all smiled viciously. They had been intimidated by Feng Yixiao before, so they could only watch helplessly as their companions were killed. They felt extremely sullen inside, and now they could finally avenge themselves. Looks like the heavens want me dead today. To think that I, Feng Yixiao, have wandered the world for so many years and killed countless experts. Even experts who were far more powerful than me failed to take my life. I never thought that I would actually die at the hands of a few ants in the end. How pitiful! How lamentable! Feng Yixiao sighed at the sky. His face was filled with reluctance. Although he had only been struck by a single strike from Gentian's sword, his wounds were extraordinarily severe. Destructive chaotic force wreaked havoc in his body, and he was unable to suppress it at all. His wounds rapidly worsened with each passing second. He had already lost the ability to fight now. Although he could escape with his soul, Feng Yixiao did not believe he could escape from Jianchen. The final outcome could not be changed. The 4 saint rulers all smiled viciously as they raised their saint weapons. Killing a 9th heavenly layer saint ruler was something they took great pride in. As a result, the 4 of them decided to deal with Feng Yixiao together. Stop! At this moment, a shout rang out from the distance. Due to the great distance, the voice was extremely weak by the time it reached Feng Yixiao, but they still heard it clearly. Jianchen trembled slightly. He suddenly turned his head in the direction of the voice and saw a black speck suddenly appear on the horizon. It was currently rushing over with lightning speed. Although it was very far away, Jianchen was still able to see it clearly with his eyesight. Immediately, a profound light erupted from his indifferent eyes. He stared fixedly at the black speck as disbelief filled his face. The 4 saint rulers did not care who it was. They swung their saint weapons, aiming for Feng Yixiao's heart, throat, head, and forehead. Feng Yixiao could only watch as the 4 saint weapons rapidly approached him. He had been injured by the chaotic force, so he did not even have the power to dodge. Stop! Don't harm Senior Feng. The voice rang out from the distance, once again. It was filled with worry, but it was unable to stop the 4 saint rulers from attacking Feng Yixiao. Gentian's face changed slightly when he heard that. Without any hesitation, he immediately flicked his finger, and 4 weak strands of sword qi struck the saint weapons of the 4 saint rulers with lightning-like speed. Ding! 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 With the crisp sound of metal clashing, the saint weapons of the 4 saint rulers were knocked off course by Gentian's sword qi when they were about to strike Feng Yixiao. They brushed past Feng Yixiao by a hair's breadth before heavily smashing into the ground. With a boom, a huge crater appeared in the ground. The 4 saint rulers stared at Jianchen in surprise. They were confused. "The 4 of you, stand down," Jianchen said as he stared at the figure running over from the distance. "Yes, Captain." Jianchen's orders were like an imperial edict. The 4 saint rulers responded politely and obediently took a few steps back after putting away their saint weapons. Even though they were filled with doubt, none of them dared to ask. The person in the distance drew closer and closer. Gradually they could see his appearance. He was a man in tattered clothes with disheveled hair, but he was extremely burly. His messy hair covered most of his face, and the small part of his face that was exposed was dirty and covered in dust. He seemed like a beggar. The 4 saint rulers of the flame mercenaries could not help but look at the disheveled man running over from afar. They were extremely curious. They wondered just who this person was, to actually be able to change the mind of their captain who had already given the order to kill Feng Yixiao, to the point where he had personally knocked aside their saint weapon and saved Feng Yixiao. However, when their gazes landed on the large man, a gleam of light flashed through their eyes at the same time. With their strength as saint rulers, they could obviously tell that the large man was only a puny earth saint master with a single glance. However, he ran extremely quickly. Even the wind-attributed heaven saint masters who had reached the 6th cycle could not catch up to him. It was impossible for an earth saint master to erupt with such speed even with a heaven-tier battle skill. The ragged beggar-like man rushed over to Feng Yixiao's side with lightning speed. As if he did not notice the people standing beside him, he crouched down and helped the heavily injured Feng Yixiao up. He asked worriedly, Senior Feng, are you all right? Feng Yixiao obviously recognized the disheveled man who had just parted ways with him. A sliver of surprise flashed through his eyes as he weakly said, Kid, how did you get here? And how did you catch up? Senior Feng, I immediately sensed that your life was in danger after you left, so I immediately chased after you. Fortunately, I wasn't too late, the disheveled man sternly replied. The disheveled man said with a straight face. He secretly heaved a sigh of relief in his heart. He was very glad that he had come in time. Silly kid, how can you control something that even I, Feng Yixiao, can't deal with? Leave immediately, or you'll probably be dragged down by me and end up in trouble, Feng Yixiao said feebly as he coughed blood. As he spoke, he coughed up blood. His wounds continued to worsen, making it rather difficult for him to even speak. He even suspected that even if Jianqin did not kill him, he would not be able to last for half an incense stick's worth of time. If it were not for the fact that he was a true, holy emperor, he might have been able to temporarily suppress the sliver of chaotic force within him if he used his full strength. Unfortunately, he was still half a step away from becoming a holy emperor. Jianqin stood there as he stared at the disheveled man blankly. His eyes were wide open as disbelief filled his face. Chapter 1208. Changyang, who was stunned when he heard the extremely familiar voice. He instinctively raised his head and looked at Jianqin. With a single glance, he recognized the handsome young man as his fourth brother, Changyang Shoten, whom he had not seen in many years. Surprise immediately filled his eyes as he said in surprise, Fourth brother, why is it you? However, Changyang, who soon spotted the great walls of Flame City that were completely forged from tungsten alloy, he came to a realization. He had never thought that he would end up with the Flame Mercenaries after tailing Feng Yixiao. Jianqin arrived before Changyang, who in a single stride. He stared at Changyang, who in both excitement and doubt. Big brother, didn't you go to the Pure Heart Pavilion? Why have you suddenly appeared here and ended up like this? Did the Pure Heart Pavilion? Jianqin paused, but the meaning behind his words was obvious. Everyone present understood what he meant. Jianqin suspected that Changyang, who had been kicked out of the Pure Heart Pavilion. Otherwise, how could a disciple of one of the 10 great protector clans end up in such a miserable state, where he did not even have a decent set of clothes? Feng Yixiao immediately became shocked when he heard Jianqin's words. He had never thought that the interesting kid he had met along the way would actually be a disciple of the Pure Heart Pavilion. Moreover, Feng Yixiao's other identity left him extremely shocked. He was actually the big brother of the captain of the Flame Mercenaries, Jianqin. Feng Yixiao found this to be unbelievable. Changyang, who obviously guessed what Jianqin meant, he shook his head gently and said, Fourth brother, it's not what you think. Let's talk about this later. Changyang, who paused, he glanced at the heavily injured and pained Feng Yixiao and said, Fourth brother, do you have some grievances with Senior Feng? Why have you injured Senior Feng like this? Jianqin glanced at Feng Yixiao with mixed feelings. He asked, Big brother, do the two of you know each other? Changyang, who checked Feng Yixiao's wounds as he said, Fourth brother, Senior Feng has saved my life before. Can you spare Senior Feng for Big brother's sake? Jianqin agreed to Changyang, whose request without any hesitation. Afterwards, he strode over to Feng Yixiao and gently pressed his hand on Feng Yixiao's shoulder, sucking out the remaining strand of chaotic force in his body. Without the torment of the chaotic force, Feng Yixiao immediately became much more relaxed. However, he was shocked by the energy Jianqin had used. It was just too terrifying. If the energy continued to remain in his body, he probably would have died to it without needing anyone else to do anything. The 4 saint rulers of the Flame Mercenaries looked at each other. They had never thought that something like this would happen. Feng Yixiao, who had come aggressively to kill the Flame Mercenaries, was actually acquainted with Jianqin's elder brother, Changyang, who. The 4 of them felt extremely speechless. Bai Hai remained very calm, as if he did not care that Feng Yixiao had killed a great protector of the flame mercenaries. With a flip of his hand, Jian Chen pulled out 3 thumb-sized pills from his space ring and passed them to Feng Yixiao. He said, "Since you've saved my elder brother's life, I won't pursue the matter of you killing a protector of the flame mercenaries. Here are 3 Class 6 Radiant Spirit pills. They may not be able to completely heal you, but they can help you recover some battle prowess. I have my own healing pills." Feng Yixiao did not accept the pills from Jianchen. Instead, he pulled out a jade bottle from his space ring and poured all the pills into his mouth before immediately circulating his energy to heal. He was extremely heavily injured. Although his chaotic force had been sucked back by Jianchen, he needed to control his wounds as quickly as possible. Otherwise, if his wounds continued to worsen, there might even be side effects that would be difficult to heal. Jianchen awkwardly put away the radiant spirit pills before saying to Changyang, who, "Brother, let's return to Flame City. It's been many years since we've seen each other. Let's go back and catch up." Changyang, who was rather tempted. He had indeed not seen Jianchen in a very long time, so there were many things he wanted to talk about. However, when his gaze landed on Feng Yixiao, who sat on the ground and healed, a sliver of hesitation appeared on his face. He said, "Brother, I'll watch over Senior Feng for now. Once Senior Feng recovers, I'll go to Flame City." Jianchen nodded before letting the 4 saint rulers return by themselves. He stayed behind with Changyang Hu. After bidding farewell to Changyang Hu, Bai Hai returned to Flame City as well. For hours later, Feng Yixiao opened his eyes. His face was still rather pale. After 4 hours of healing, his wounds had not completely healed, but he had recovered some battle prowess. During that time, Jianchen and Changyang Hu chatted for a while and finally understood Changyang Hu's current situation. However, as soon as he thought about how his brother might forget about their brotherhood in the future, Jianchen felt pained inside. In reality, Jianchen had already discovered these things from Changyang Hu many years ago. Before Changyang Hu's limbs had recovered, he had already displayed an abnormal state of mind. However, he had never thought that after so many years, Changyang Hu would progress further and further on this path. He had already severed all his emotions, leaving behind only this single emotion. "Senior Feng, you've woken up. How are your wounds?" Changyang Hu stopped chatting with Jianchen when he saw Feng Yixiao open his eyes. He arrived beside Feng Yixiao and asked in concern. Now that Feng Yixiao's gaze toward Changyang Hu had changed slightly, he could not help but chuckle when he heard Changyang Hu's concerned greeting. He stood up and said, "I've recovered by 30%, so running is no problem. Kid, I never thought that your identity would be so extraordinary. It really does surprise me. I saved your life a few days ago, and now that you've saved mine, we don't owe each other anything. All right, let's not talk too much. Farewell. I hope you'll still remember me the next time we meet." "Senior Feng, I'll definitely remember you the next time we meet," Changyang Hu called out at Feng Yixiao's departing figure. Jianchen frowned slightly when he heard that. He became more and more worried. He had no idea if Changyang Hu would still care about their brotherhood and familial ties when they met again in a few years. "Brother, why don't you stop walking this path and cultivate in a different way? I can help you find a sacred cultivation method that suits you," Jianchen said with some concern. He did not want his brother to end up like that. Changyang Hu gently sighed. "Brother, I can't stop now. I feel like there's no other path for me to take apart from this one. And even if I don't want to take this path, there's a mysterious force that's secretly pushing me forward." Jianchen fell silent. He had already realized that his brother's fate seemed to have been decided by the heavens. It was impossible to change anything. Jianchen and Changyang, who both felt rather gloomy because of this matter. Neither of them said anything after that. Unknowingly, the 2 of them had returned to the city, Lord's estate, at the same time. "Brother, I heard that you let the troublemaker go. Is that true?" As soon as they returned to the city, Lord's estate, Bai Lian pulled on Jian Chen's arm and asked. Jian Chen nodded. Because Feng Yixiao saved brother's life, so I let him go. Brother? Bai Lian was confused, but then she saw Changyang, who was dressed like a beggar beside Jian Chen. She was stunned at first before her mouth dropped open. She studied Changyang, who from head to toe as her bright eyes were filled with disbelief. Brother, who? Why is it you? Why you? Why are you dressed like that? Bai Lian's mouth dropped open as she asked in surprise. Yu walked in as well. When she recognized the person in tattered clothes as Changyang, she was shocked as well. Changyang, who lowered his head and looked at the tattered clothes on him. He smiled indifferently and said, What's wrong with this? I feel pretty good. Bai Lian stumbled when she heard Changyang, whose words, almost falling to the ground. Even Yu was speechless. Jian Chen could not help but laugh aloud as well. His annoyance was completely swept away. He said, Lian get someone to prepare some food and wine. I want to have a few good drinks with brother. All right, I'll arrange it immediately. Oh, right, brother. Why didn't you save great Protector Gutu? Why did you have to wait until he was dead before making a move? Bai Lian asked curiously. Lian, you need to understand that our flame mercenaries is not a refuge. We come in when there's trouble and leave when the trouble is dealt with. That Gutu didn't have good intentions when he came to our mercenaries. He wanted to use us to stop his enemies. Once we destroy his enemies, Gutu will probably leave our mercenaries as well. I'm doing this today to give people with such thoughts a warning. Just be careful when you accept people in the future, said Jian Chen. I understand, brother. Due to Changyang, whose unexpected return, Jian Chen left Flame City ahead of time. The space gate that the Extinguishing Alliance had constructed when they occupied Flame City had been repaired as well. That afternoon, Changyang, who put on a clean set of clothes and returned to Changyang Prefecture with Jian Chen, and Yu through the space gate in Flame City. Chapter 1209. After Jian Chen returned to Changyang Prefecture, he learned that Changyang Zuyunkong had already left. He had gone to Mercenary City alone and had only left behind a single sentence. He would not return until he had reached the level of the Holy Emperor. Jian Chen understood that Changyang Zuyunkong had probably been greatly affected by what had happened in Changyang Prefecture. He desperately wanted to increase his strength because only experts like the Holy Emperor had the right to speak before the Protector clans. Jian Chen spent a day with his brother in Changyang Prefecture. 2 days had already passed since he had to go to the Blood Sword sect. Only 1 day remained. The next morning, Jian Chen got Yu to stay in Changyang Prefecture. Afterwards, he asked Ruijin to construct a space gate that led to the ocean before leaving by himself. Jian Chen identified his bearings on the boundless ocean before flying toward Three Saint Island as quickly as he could. Shangguanao Jian's chubby face constantly appeared in his head. Jian Chen still found the matter of him suddenly having a son to be unreal. He had never thought that the heavenly enchantress would actually give birth to a child for him, and the child would even possess the innate chaotic body. At this moment, Shangguanao Jin sat on a piece of white rock on Three Saint Island's Three Saint Mountain. His eyes were closed, and he seemed to be cultivating. Before Shangguanao Jin, Qin Qin, Xiao Qian, Xiao Yu, and the heavenly enchantress all stared at the closed Shangguanao Jin. Their gazes were filled with love and undisguised concern. At this moment, Shangguanao Jin slowly opened his eyes. He could not help but become slightly doubtful when he saw his 3 sisters and mother staring at him nervously. He scratched his head and asked in a clear voice, "Mother, Sister Xiao Qian, Sister Xiao Yu, Sister Qin Qin, why are you all staring at me like that?" Qin Qin, Xiao Qian, Xiao Yu, and the heavenly enchantress all became surprised when they saw Shangguanao Jin open his eyes. Xiao Qian asked in surprise, "Xiao Bao, you just ingested a pill refined from a 10,000-year-old heavenly resource an hour ago. Has the effects of the pill run out so quickly? It's over, it's over. These pills are becoming less and less effective for Xiaobao. Back then, when Xiaobao ingested 1,000-year-old heavenly resource, he could last for most of the day before the effects completely ran out. Now, a pill refined from a 10,000-year-old heavenly resource can only last for an hour. This is a pill that can allow people who can't cultivate to undergo a complete transformation. Yet it's completely useless to Xiaobao. Is Xiaobao destined to live out his life peacefully? Xiao Yu sighed. Shangguan Aojian stood up from the rock in dissatisfaction when he heard Xiao Qian and Xiao Yu's words. He placed his hands on his hips and said loudly, Sister Xiao Qian, Sister Xiao Yu, Xiaobao isn't trash. He's the most powerful innate chaotic body in the world. And the effects of those heavenly resources didn't run out either. Instead, they were absorbed by Xiaobao. Xiaobao seemed to think of something when he reached there. He happily announced, also, Xiaobao has a name now. It's Shangguan Aojian. Xiao Qian, Xiao Yu, and Qin Qin became curious. Qin Qin said, the most powerful innate chaotic body in the world. Xiaobao, what's the innate chaotic body? Where did you hear that from? Why haven't I heard you mention it before? Also, Master doesn't seem to have given you the name Shangguan Aojian. Xiao Yu pinched Shangguan Aojian's cheeks lovingly. She stared at Xiaobao with her large, bright eyes and said, Yeah. Xiaobao, Master definitely didn't give you the name Shangguan Aojian, right? Otherwise, Master would definitely have told us. Xiaobao is so smart. I think Xiaobao must have come up with the name himself, right? Xiao Qian giggled. In other words, this innate chaotic body or whatever was named by Xiaobao himself, right? The three girls constantly chattered around Xiaobao. All of them were very fond of Xiaobao. No, it's all my father's. Shangguan Aojian puffed up his cheeks. He wanted to explain that his father was the one who had told him about the innate chaotic body. His father had also given him the name Shangguan Aojian. He even wanted to tell the three sisters that he had a father. Enough. Xiaobao, eat this 10,000-year-old ginseng. However, the heavenly enchantress covered Xiaobao's mouth before he could finish his sentence. She then took out a 10,000-year-old ginseng from her space ring. Seeing the heavenly treasure, Xiaobao's eyes lit up. He immediately threw the unfinished words to the back of his mind. He took the 10,000-year-old ginseng and wolfed it down. After finishing the ginseng, he sat cross-legged on the rock and entered a state of cultivation. Although Xiaobao didn't finish his sentence, Xiao Qian and the other two clearly heard the word daddy. They all revealed puzzled expressions. Xiaobao actually mentioned his father earlier. Did I hear wrong? Master, what's going on? Why does it feel like Xiaobao has changed so much after you took him out? He even changed his name for no reason. Xiao Yu asked the heavenly enchantress. She was extremely curious. The heavenly enchantress expression became rather unnatural. She avoided Xiao Yu's eyes, rather afraid to look at her. She just turned around and said nonchalantly, I came across an expert this time and accidentally learned that Xiaobao's constitution was not a cripple. Instead, he possessed the innate chaotic body. The expert passed on a cultivation method to him as well. However, cultivating a constitution like that requires a large number of heavenly resources. The resources required for cultivation are extremely vast. Ah, is that true? Is Xiaobao really not a cripple who can't cultivate? That's just fantastic. Xiao Qian and Xiao Yu rejoiced when they heard that. Only Qin Qin glanced past the heavenly enchantress back and Xiaobao's face from time to time as the light in her eyes flickered. An hour passed very quickly. Xiaobao opened his eyes after refining the ginseng again. He stared at the heavenly enchantress eagerly and said, Mother, I want more. Be good, Xiaobao. It's not good to eat too many heavenly resources. Don't eat them today. You can eat them tomorrow. Xiao Qian could not help but worry when she saw how much Shangguan Aojian ate. If he ate too many heavenly resources, it would leave behind hidden injuries. The heavenly enchantress smiled and stared at Xiao Bao lovingly. Just when she was about to take out a few more heavenly resources from her space ring, her face suddenly changed, and she vanished from the mountain with a flash. 10 kilometers away from the island, Jianqin was stopped by the heavenly enchantress who had suddenly appeared. The heavenly enchantress stared at Jianqin cautiously. She just happened to block Jianqin's path to the island. "What are you doing here?" The heavenly enchantress was hostile, as if she did not welcome Jianqin's arrival. Jianqin was filled with mixed feelings as he stared at the heavenly enchantress figure. After learning that the heavenly enchantress had given birth to a child for him, Jianqin actually felt like he had no idea how to face the heavenly enchantress. "I've come to see my son." After a moment of silence, Jianqin still stated his intentions. "Go back. Three Saint Island does not welcome you in the future." The heavenly enchantress rejected Jianqin without any hesitation. She left no room for negotiation. Xiao Bao seemed to sense something and suddenly stood up on the rock. He turned around and stared in Jianqin's direction. Although they were 20 to 30 kilometers away, Xiao Bao could still clearly see Jianqin. He immediately smiled happily. "Daddy, Daddy, I'm here." Although Xiao Bao had only seen Jianqin once, he was extraordinarily close to Jianqin. He bounced up and down on the rock as he constantly waved in Jianqin's direction, as if he was afraid that Jianqin could not see him. "Daddy, Daddy, I'm here." Xiao Bao kept shouting. What was surprising was that even though his voice wasn't loud, it traveled very far. It actually didn't dissipate even after traveling 20 to 30 kilometers. It continued to travel even further. Xiao Qian and Xiao Yu were stunned. They stared blankly at Xiao Bao, who was jumping up and down on the rock and waving his hand in the distance. Their faces were filled with disbelief. They had clearly heard Xiao Bao call out "Daddy," which made them wonder if they had heard wrongly. Chapter 12:10. Jianqin immediately beamed with joy when he heard Xiao Bao's voice. He was slightly excited as well. He immediately used the illusory flash and took a step forward. He left behind an afterimage as he hurried toward the Three Saints Mountain as quickly as he could. The heavenly enchantress returned to her senses and watched Jianqin rapidly approach the mountain. She was conflicted. She was confident that she could stop Jianqin from reaching the island or even keep him outside, but she would definitely end up fighting with Jianqin if she did that. However, she also did not want to stop Jianqin, which made her feel rather conflicted. Jianqin moved extremely quickly, crossing over 20 kilometers in the blink of an eye. In that moment of hesitation, Jianqin had already arrived on the mountain. It was too late for the heavenly enchantress to stop him now. "Daddy, Daddy, you're finally here." "I've missed Daddy so much," Xiao Bao happily called out. Xiao Bao cheered happily. He jumped down from the rock nimbly and skipped over to Jianqin. He raised his hands and said, "Daddy, hug me." Jianqin showed a sliver of affection that had never appeared on his face before when he saw Xiao Bao's chubby and adorable face. He picked Xiao Bao up in one go. He was so emotional that he was speechless. Qin stared at Jianqin and Xiao Bao with mixed feelings. Although she had guessed that Xiao Bao's identity would end up like this, it was only a guess after all. She actually felt a faint pain in the depths of her heart when it became reality. Jianqin's arrival should have been something worth celebrating for Qin, but it was the exact opposite. She was unable to celebrate no matter what. Instead, she became rather gloomy. Xiao Qian and Xiao Yu failed to notice Qin's change. They had already become stunned by Xiao Bao's words. They stared at Xiao Bao, who was in Jianqin's arms and calling him "Daddy" so intimately. Their minds had completely stopped working. Xiao Qian finally returned to her senses quite a while later. She refused to believe that Jianqin was Xiao Bao's father no matter what. She thought that Xiao Bao had called him by the wrong name, so she hurriedly corrected him. "Xiao Bao, you should call Jianqin brother or uncle, not daddy. You can't call him daddy so casually." Xiao Bao clung tightly to Jianqin's neck. He felt that being hugged by his father was even more comfortable than being hugged by his mother. It was as if his father possessed something that his mother did not. Sister Xiao Qian, you're lying. He's clearly my daddy, not big brother or uncle. I want to call him daddy. I want to call him daddy. Xiaobao pouted and said to Xiao Qian in dissatisfaction. At this moment, Xiao Yu returned to her senses as well. She glanced past Jianqin and Xiaobao's faces and gradually became surprised. She said, Xiao Qian, why do I feel like Xiaobao and young Master Jianqin look so similar? Xiao Qian immediately studied them carefully with that. Now that Jianqin and Xiaobao were together, she did indeed find similarities when she compared their appearances. Xiao Qian immediately became surprised. She said, Xiaoyu, now that you've mentioned it, I've also discovered that Xiaobao and young Master Jianqin look far too similar. If it weren't for the fact that I know Xiaobao's origins, I would have suspected. Xiao Qian suddenly felt that something was off when she reached there. The two of them had only heard about Xiaobao's origins from their master. They did not know whether Xiaobao's true identity was like what their master had said. Now that Xiaobao constantly called him daddy as soon as he saw Jianqin, the two of them just happened to look far too similar, like father and son. Xiao Qian immediately felt that something was wrong. Sister Xiao Qian, Sister Xiaoyu, you've actually come with mother to lie to Xiaobao, saying that Xiaobao doesn't have a daddy. Actually, Xiaobao has a daddy. Xiaobao has already found his daddy, Xiaobao said angrily. Xiaobao said angrily. His voice was childish, and he did not hide his displeasure towards Xiao Qian and Xiaoyu at all. His arm around Jianqin's neck tightened. Xiaobao, is what you said true? Young master, Jianqin really is. Xiaoyu gently covered her mouth as she stared at Xiaobao and Jianqin with widened eyes. Disbelief filled her face as her heart churned. Xiaobao won't lie. Also, my daddy has already given me a new name. It's Shangguanao Jian, Xiaobao said complacently. Impossible. This can't be true. Xiao Qian and Xiaoyu became stunned. Neither of them dared to believe this. If Xiaobao's father was Jianqin, then who was his mother? However, as long as they thought about how their master treated Xiaobao and the motherly love she would show from time to time, they already had an answer. They just refused to believe it. The heavenly enchantress also returned to 3 Saint Mountain. She glanced past Xiao Qian and Xiaoyu with her enchanting gaze and secretly sighed inside. She already knew that Xiaobao's true identity had been exposed from their expressions. Master, Xiaobao's identity. Xiao Qian continued to look at the heavenly enchantress in disbelief. She wanted to know the answer from her. The heavenly enchantress avoided her gaze. At this moment, she actually did not dare to make eye contact with her 3 disciples. She seemed very calm on the surface, but she was in a complete mess inside. Xiao Qian, Xiaoyu, Qin, the 3 of you can leave, the heavenly enchantress coldly ordered. She was emotionless. Xiao Qian and Xiaoyu's eyes widened. Although they did not say it out loud, everyone present understood what they were implying. However, what took them by surprise was that their master did not admit or deny it. Instead, she was rather afraid to face them. They had followed their master for so many years, but they had never seen this side of her. Senior Xiao Qian, Senior Xiaoyu, let's leave first. Qin went up and pulled the 2 of them away. Although this matter had not been confirmed, they already had an answer. They just refused to believe it. The 3 of them vanished very soon. The heavenly enchantress coldly stared at Jianqin. Her gaze contained some anger as she asked, "What are you doing here?" At this moment, the heavenly enchantress was indeed extremely furious. Jianqin's uninvited visit had actually exposed Xiaobao's identity to her 3 disciples. She had no idea how to face them in the future. I've obviously come to see my son. As a father, I have a responsibility to care for my child, Jianqin smiled. He did not care about the heavenly enchantress attitude at all. Daddy, you can stay here in the future. You can be with Mommy every day, and Xiao Bao can see Daddy every day, Xiao Bao said in a childish voice. Xiao Bao said in his childish voice. His little mouth was almost touching Jian Chen's face, and his hot breath tickled Jian Chen's cheek. Jian Chen's heart was deeply touched when he saw Xiao Bao's hopeful gaze. At that moment, he was actually unable to turn down Xiao Bao's request. He was tempted to agree. After all, he had only learned that he had a son when Xiao Bao was 2 or 3 years old. He had never cared for Xiao Bao in the past, not even knowing that he had a child. He felt like he had let Xiao Bao down. However, Jian Chen was a rational person. He knew that he could not do it right now, at least not right now. Xiao Bao, Daddy can't stay with you all day because Daddy still has many important matters to attend to. However, Daddy can promise you that once I'm done with my matters, I'll stay with you all day, all right? Jian Chen gently said. His eyes were filled with love. Chapter 12:11. Jian Chen had come to 3 Saint Island this time to visit Xiao Bao as well as to give him some cultivation resources. Xiao Bao possessed the innate chaotic body, so the resources he required for cultivation were extremely tremendous as well. They were no less than Jian Chen's. When Jian Chen first started cultivating the chaotic body, he had the assistance of the sword spirits. They were able to refine ruler armaments into pure chaotic force for Jian Chen to absorb. They assisted Jian Chen in his cultivation of the chaotic body, allowing him to make rapid progress. Although Xiao Bao possessed the innate chaotic body, he was just too young and did not have the assistance of the sword spirits to refine ruler armaments into chaotic force. As a result, he could only rely on heavenly resources and various other resources to cultivate. Jian Chen had never considered absorbing the energy of the world to cultivate. Chaotic force was different from ordinary energy. Cultivating just a strand of chaotic force required tremendous amounts of energy of the world. If he just relied on absorbing energy of the world to cultivate, his progress would probably be extremely slow even if the energy of the world was 100 times denser. When Jian Chen reached the first layer of the chaotic body, he had absorbed 100,000 years' worth of energy from Shaoling in Mercenary City. Although the energy might have been something that Shaoling had casually gathered and not something that Shaoling had gathered, it was not difficult to imagine just how much energy Jian Chen had used to reach the first layer of the chaotic body. Jian Chen had obtained a large number of high-class monster cores from the Heaven's Incense School last time. Now that he wanted Xiao Bao to reach the basics of the chaotic body as soon as possible, he took out 3 Class 9 monster cores, 10 Class 8 monster cores, and a few Class 7, 6, and 5 monster cores from his space ring without any hesitation at all. He also gave them to Xiao Bao along with all the heavenly resources in his space ring. A small portion of Jian Chen's space ring suddenly shrank after taking out all these items, but he did not feel pained at all. A 9th order monster core. You actually have a 9th order monster core. Even the heavenly enchantress could not help but cry out when she saw the Class 9 monster core. Class 9 monster cores could only be obtained from Class 9 magical beasts that had reached the level of Holy Emperor. Even the Holy Emperor's skeleton paled in value in comparison to Class 9 monster cores. They were basically legendary items on the Tianyuan continent. Even with the heavenly enchantress' mental fortitude, she could not help but be moved when Jian Chen took out 3 Class 9 monster cores at once. What surprised the heavenly enchantress even more was that, aside from the 3 Class 9 monster cores that Jian Chen had taken out, there were 10 Class 8 monster cores as well. Class 8 monster cores were basically extinct on the Tianyuan continent, rarely seen even once every few millennia. The heavenly enchantress began to suspect that Jian Chen had robbed the 10 protector clans of the continent when she saw Jian Chen take out so many high-class monster cores all of a sudden. This was because no other organization possessed so many high-class monster cores aside from the protector clans and Mercenary City that had existed for over 1,000,000 years. Xiao Bao consumes an extremely large amount of energy when cultivating. These things should be able to support Xiao Bao's cultivation for a while, so I'll give them all to you now. I'll have to trouble you to take care of Xiao Bao in the future." Jianqin placed all the items into a space ring and passed it to the heavenly enchantress. Obviously, he would not give all these valuable items to Xiao Bao. After all, Xiao Bao was still a child. If he lost the space ring, it would be a great loss. The heavenly enchantress did not refuse. She accepted the space ring without saying anything. Ever since Xiao Bao had obtained the cultivation method for the chaotic body from the sword spirits, she had witnessed the speed at which he consumed heavenly resources. Xiao Bao only needed 2 hours to completely absorb a 10,000-year-old heavenly resource. This speed could only be described as shocking. At the same time, Xiao Bao did not show any obvious changes, even after consuming several thousand-year-old and 10,000-year-old heavenly resources. Not a single drop of energy had accumulated in his dantian, which was more than enough to demonstrate just how tremendous the energy required to cultivate the chaotic body was. The strength of the chaotic body can't be described with common sense. Xiao Bao possesses the innate chaotic body, so he possesses some unique advantages. He won't leave behind any side effects when consuming heavenly resources and refining monster cores. So you don't have to worry at all when you discover that Xiao Bao consumes heavenly resources and monster cores at a rather fast rate. Jianqin explained many more matters related to Xiao Bao's chaotic body to the heavenly enchantress, allowing her to gain a rough understanding of Xiao Bao's constitution. "Then when will Xiao Bao be able to cultivate the chaotic force you speak of?" the heavenly enchantress asked. Although she was extremely unwilling to speak to Jianqin, she still cared about her child very much. She had to understand everything that concerned her child. If he wants to cultivate chaotic force, he needs to refine the chaotic body. Right now, Xiao Bao is still in the process of refining the chaotic body, so all the energy he absorbs has been absorbed by his body. Once he finishes refining the chaotic body, he'll be able to form chaotic force. You don't understand the chaotic body, so don't interfere with Xiao Bao's cultivation. Xiao Bao already has the cultivation method for the chaotic body, so as long as he cultivates according to the method, he'll naturally succeed in the early stages, Jianqin said. Jianqin stayed on 3 Saint Island for most of the day before leaving. He spent almost all of that time explaining the chaotic body to Xiao Bao. He also passed on all the experiences and knowledge he had gained from cultivating the chaotic body to Xiao Bao without holding back at all. Only when Jianqin left 3 Saint Island and arrived above the ocean did he remember that he had not brought the Holy Emperor with him. Without the Holy Emperor, he would not be able to rip open a space gate. He was over 10 million kilometers away from the kingdom of Jessen, so even with Jianqin's speed, it would take him half a month to fly over such a great distance. "Do I have to go back and find the heavenly enchantress to construct a space gate for me?" Jianqin frowned. His face had already sunk. His relationship with the heavenly enchantress had always been rather subtle, so he really would be rather embarrassed if he had to ask her to send him home. Jianqin sighed helplessly as he stared at the vast ocean. Just when he had no idea what to do, the artifact spirit's voice rang out in his head. He immediately beamed with joy, and without any hesitation, he immediately entered the artifact space. Boom! Before Jianqin could even see his surroundings, he heard a deafening boom as soon as he entered the artifact space. At the same time, a tremendous pressure from the surroundings permeated the space. A Saint Tier battle skill. Jianqin shivered inside. He immediately understood that someone was using a Saint Tier battle skill from the tremendous pressure, and the caster was quite powerful. They had reached the level of Holy Emperor at the very least. "Master, your friend who's been studying Saint Tier battle skills has emerged from seclusion." The artifact spirit silently appeared beside Jianqin and said politely. As expected, Jianqin saw a dazzling golden person hovering 1,000 meters away. A huge, snake-shaped dragon writhed above his head. Although the dragon was made of energy, it also shone with resplendent golden light and possessed a tremendous pressure. At this moment, the giant dragon in the sky let out a dragon's roar before transforming into a golden afterimage and crashing toward the ground at an unbelievable speed. Boom! Another deafening rumble rang out, causing the ground to violently tremble. Thick cracks appeared in the surrounding area, and a bottomless black hole with a diameter of 100 meters appeared where the dragon had struck. The golden dragon did not disperse after unleashing such a shocking attack. It flew out of the bottomless black hole as a golden streak of light before circling above the person's head once more. Chapter 12:12. Jianchen could not help but smile. He was filled with joy as well. He had never thought that newbies, who had been painstakingly working on a Saint Tier battle skill for several years, would finally emerge from seclusion and successfully modify a Saint Tier battle skill that was not suitable for him into a powerful one. This made Jianchen happy for newbies. In particular, when he sensed the powerful pressure in the surroundings, he became even more surprised. Although he had never experienced the Saint Tier battle skill that newbies had modified, he could tell that the might of the Saint Tier battle skill that newbies could erupt with was probably no weaker than the 7th heavenly layer of the Holy Emperor's attack. The golden dragon above newbies' head began to revolve rapidly again. Surging pulses of energy surged out as the pressure in the surroundings slowly increased. Jianchen knew that newbies was not done venting yet. He was about to use the Saint Tier battle skill again. If they were outside, Jianchen obviously would not stop him, but this was the artifact space. This was his territory. He did not wish for his territory to be turned upside down by newbies. As a result, Jianchen hurriedly said, "Newbies, stop. If you want to try the Saint Tier battle skill, try it outside. Don't cause trouble in the artifact space." Ha 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 ha, Jianchen. The great newbies have finally modified the Saint Tier battle skill that was only suitable for the sea race into a Saint Tier battle skill that only belongs to me, newbies. This Saint Tier battle skill was specially made for me. Aside from me, golden striped silver snakes, no other human or magical beast can use it. Jianchen, I'll let you have a taste of my Saint Tier battle skill. Take this. Newbies laughed aloud. He was filled with excitement and pride. As soon as he finished speaking, the golden dragon above him let out a roar and charged toward Jianchen as a streak of golden light. Jianchen became stern. Newbies was at the 3rd heavenly layer of the Holy Emperor, yet the Saint Tier battle skill he used actually made Jianchen feel a great pressure. Not only had Jianchen's presence been locked onto by the golden dragon, making it impossible for him to dodge, but even the space around him had become sticky. Not only did he feel like he had fallen into a swamp, but he also felt a heavy pressure from all directions. It was like a huge mountain was pressing down on him, greatly restricting his movements. Jianchen's indifferent gaze sharpened at that moment as a powerful battle intent radiated from him. Although Jianchen was not afraid of newbie's Saint Tier battle skill, he did not dare to be careless. Strands of chaotic body surged through his body, fusing with every inch of his flesh. Jianchen pushed the advantage of the chaotic body to the limit, forcing the sticky space around him back by a meter. The Emperor armament had silently appeared in his right hand. Violent and destructive chaotic force revolved around the Emperor armament. Jianchen left behind an afterimage as he advanced instead of retreating. He took the initiative to face the charging golden dragon with an unstoppable force. Boom! With a great boom, Jianchen clashed with the golden dragon. Terrifying ripples of energy wreaked havoc in the surroundings as golden storms of energy, dyeing the surroundings golden. It was dazzling. The space in the center of the golden world violently trembled, blurring everything. If it were not for the fact that the artifact space was more stable than the outside world, the two of them probably would have ripped the space apart. After a long while, the dazzling golden energy slowly receded. Jianchen's stalwart figure stood where the golden dragon had been. His clothes were rather disheveled, and a small area had even been damaged, but his expression did not change at all. He remained as composed as before. The ground beneath his feet had vanished, replaced by a huge crater that was over 100 meters wide. His feet hovered in the air, not on the ground but in the air. However, the golden serpentine dragon that Nubis had conjured with his Saint Tyr battle skill had vanished. 1,000 meters away, Nubis blinked his eyes as he hovered in the air. He stared at Gentian in some disbelief and cried out, "How is this possible? My Saint Tyr battle skill has already reached the 7th heavenly layer of the Holy Emperor. Even a 7th heavenly layer Holy Emperor would need to expend quite a lot of effort to block it. So how did you break through it so easily? Gentian, what level of cultivation have you reached now? Have you reached the 8th heavenly layer?" Gentian stowed the Emperor armament away. He did not care about the slight damage on his body at all. With a single step, he crossed 1,000 meters and arrived beside Nubis. He chuckled. "My strength is the same as yours at the 3rd heavenly layer of the Holy Emperor. However, if I use my full strength with the Emperor armament, I should be able to reach the peak of the 7th heavenly layer. I understand the Saint Tyr battle skill that I've modified extremely well. I need a sliver of my origin energy to use it, so it's incomparable to regular Saint Tyr battle skills. Even if your battle prowess has reached the peak of the 7th heavenly layer, it's impossible for you to block my Saint Tyr battle skill so easily," Nubis questioned. He still refused to believe that Gentian's battle prowess was at the peak of the Holy Emperor's 7th heavenly layer. Gentian thought about it and said, "Perhaps my chaotic force has gained a slight advantage." Nubis nodded in agreement with that. He said, "The energy you use is strange. Looks like that really is the problem. All right, let's not talk about this for now. Let's go out first. I just happened to run into some problems that I need your help with," Gentian said. Nubis' eyes lit up with that. He said, "I never thought that there would be a battle as soon as I emerged from seclusion. Let's go. I'll find someone to test the power of my Saint Tyr battle skill on." Gentian shook his head in a rather speechless manner. Nubis really was a battle maniac, actually treating his problems as if he had encountered a powerful enemy. However, he did not explain anything. He left the artifact space with Nubis. Arriving on a boundless sea, Nubis looked around. Aside from a small island in the distance, it was all boundless sea. "Gentian, didn't you say that you ran into some problems? Why can't I, the great Nubis, see a single enemy?" Nubis asked in doubt as he constantly looked around. Gentian glared at Nubis in an exasperated manner. He said, "I think you've become muddle-headed from your years of seclusion. I'm talking about something else, not a powerful enemy." "Then what's the problem?" Nubis subconsciously asked. He then looked at the small island in the distance and immediately came to a realization. He said, "I understand now. Gentian, let me, the great Nubis, guess. If I've guessed correctly, the problem you're talking about must be related to the heavenly enchantress, right?" Before Gentian could reply, Nubis said confidently, "Stop denying it. I knew it was definitely like that. Humph. When I, the great Nubis, was still a saint ruler, I actually cowered before the heavenly enchantress. That was the greatest humiliation I've ever suffered in my life. However, she's an expert skilled in soul attacks, and the soul is the weakness of us magical beasts. But now that my strength has skyrocketed and my soul has been refined when I modified the Saint Tyr battle skill, both my strength and soul are incomparable to before. Even if I have to face the heavenly enchantress who specializes in soul attacks again, I don't fear her at all." Nubis could not help but feel a sense of pride when he reached there. He said, "Gentian, let's go to 3 Saint Island. Let me, the great Nubis, experience the soul attacks of the heavenly enchantress and regain the face I lost back then." With that, Nubis flew toward the island. Gentian's heart skipped a beat. He knew extremely well that Nubis was basically courting death if he went to 3 Saint Island right now. He was not the heavenly enchantress opponent back then, so he was even less of an opponent now. Jianqin quickly grabbed Newbies by the shoulder and forcefully dragged him back. He sternly said, "Newbies, don't blame me for not warning you. The heavenly enchantress' strength is incomparable to before. I think she's already at the level of the 9th heavenly layer of the Holy Emperor. Her attacks are even more terrifying." Jianqin could not help but think about how the heavenly enchantress had slumbered all the experts of the Protector clan with a single song. He was certain that the heavenly enchantress had only played the song casually back then. If she had used her full strength, she would have been able to kill all the experts of the Protector clan. Even the Holy Emperor would not have been able to resist the terrifying power hidden within the song. What? She's already at the level of the 9th heavenly layer of the Holy Emperor? Newbies paled in fright as he stared at Jianqin in disbelief. A few days ago, she only played a single song casually and defeated a powerful Protector clan. Are you confident that you can still get back at her? Jianqin asked. Newbies could not help but shrink his neck when he heard that. He stared at 3 Saint Island in slight fright, no longer daring to go over. The natural advantage of magical beasts was their tough bodies. Their battle prowess was far greater than humans of the same level, but they were not without weaknesses. Their only weakness was their soul. As a result, as a magical beast, Newbies would rather risk his life against someone who could use soul attacks than make an enemy out of someone who could use soul attacks. Newbies, I may have the battle prowess of the Holy Emperor, but my comprehension of the mysteries of the world is still at the level of a 9th heavenly layer saint ruler. I can't rip open a space gate. I need to return to the kingdom of Jessin immediately. So hurry up and create a space gate. Only now did Newbies understand that Jianqin's problem was not what he had imagined it to be. It was that he could not create a space gate to return home quickly. After learning that the heavenly enchantress had become so terrifying, Newbies no longer dared to stay any longer. He immediately created a space gate as quickly as he could and left with Jianqin. Jianqin and Newbies returned to the kingdom of Jessin together before summoning the 4 protectors of the Bloodsword sect. Under the lead of the protectors, they directly hurried to the Bloodsword sect. Ruijin, Blackfish, and Honglian remained in the Changyang prefecture of Lore City. They did not go with Jianqin. However, the 3 of them had given Jianqin a method of communication. As soon as Jianqin encountered an enemy he could not defeat, the 3 of them would rush over as quickly as possible. Chapter 12-13. This time, they had the Holy Emperor Newbies with them. Originally, Jianqin and the others could have used Newbies to create a space gate to reach the Bloodsword sect. But unfortunately, neither Jianqin nor Newbies knew the exact location of the Bloodsword sect. They had never been there before, so they did not know the exact spatial coordinates. As a result, they could only rely on the 4 protectors to create a space gate and travel several 100,000 kilometers in one direction before flying the rest of the way. Under the lead of the 4 protectors, Jianqin and Newbies flew for an entire day and night before finally arriving at the base of the Bloodsword sect. Surprisingly, the base of the Bloodsword sect was hidden in an extremely secluded valley within a desolate mountain range. The valley seemed rather similar to Longevity Valley, where Uncle Xiao lived in seclusion. There was a village in the valley, but the only difference was that this valley was even more secluded than Longevity Valley. It was much larger as well. There were over 2,000 wooden huts built in an orderly fashion. All the huts were arranged in a formation according to a certain pattern. The huts were of different sizes as well. The huts at the edges were the smallest, while the huts closer to the center were the largest. At the very center of the huts was a hall constructed from 10,000-year-old ironwood. It was 7 stories tall and took up several tens of thousands of square meters of space. When Jianqin and Newbies saw the village, the entire place was deathly silent. There was not a single person in the huge village, nor was there any farmland in the surroundings. It was very easy for people to mistake it for a ghost village. However, Jianqin and Newbies did not believe that. The 2 of them had already sensed many powerful presences from the deathly silent village. The strongest of them had already reached the level of the Holy Emperor. "Is this the base of the Bloodsword sect?" Genshin asked softly as he looked at the village up ahead. "Sect Master, this is the current base of the Bloodsword sect. Basically, all the disciples of the sect cultivate in their huts. They won't come out unless there's something going on. It's very normal to not see a single person in our base for half a month," explained the Grand Protector of the Bloodsword sect. The great newbies can tell with a single glance that there are only around 2,000 people in the base. The Bloodsword sect is one of the 3 peak assassin organizations on the continent, after all. Although they've declined, they still have far too few people. Newbies smirked in disdain. The Bloodsword sect's status in his heart immediately plummeted. "Our Bloodsword sect hasn't declined. We've only gone into seclusion under the sect master's orders. We won't appear on the continent. Although the battle 1,000 years ago left us heavily injured, we've recovered after 1,000 years of recuperation. The people in this base are all core disciples of our sect. Every single one of them is an elite. Other than the core disciples, we also have several tens of thousands of outer disciples scattered across the continent," explained the Grand Protector emotionlessly. At this moment, a few people in blood-red clothes flew out of the village. They arrived before Genshin in a few seconds. There were a total of 6 people. The person at the very front was an old man in his 70s with an extremely ordinary appearance. Genshin and newbies could tell with a single glance that he was a holy emperor from the vast presence he gave off. He was at the 3rd heavenly layer, just like newbies. 2 of the 5 people behind the old man were middle-aged men, and 3 were old men. They were all at the 7th heavenly layer of Saint Rulers. 2 of them were at the 9th heavenly layer. The Vice Sect Master of the Bloodsword sect, Jiang Wang, greets the Sect Master with the 5 elders. The old man at the front called out. He bowed to Genshin. Clearly, he already knew that Genshin was the Sect Master and was extremely familiar with Genshin's appearance. Genshin could tell from the expressions of the Vice Sect Master and the 5 elders that they were not dissatisfied with him taking over the position of Sect Master. Genshin took a step forward and personally helped the Vice Sect Master up. He said, "There's no need to be so courteous, Vice Sect Master. Junior Genshin is indebted to Uncle Xiao for his favor. He has passed on the position of Sect Master to me, allowing me to carry forward the sect. If Genshin does anything wrong in the future, please give me some pointers. You're too modest, Sect Master. In the Bloodsword sect, the Sect Master possesses supreme authority. How could I offend you?" Jiang Wang replied sternly. He was extremely stern. Genshin exchanged some pleasantries with the Vice Sect Master before being invited to a small village. The 5 elders and protectors followed behind him silently. "Sect Master, the people who live here are all core members of our sect. There are over 2,300 people, and the weakest are Earth Saint Masters. There are over 220 Heaven Saint Masters, and there are 9 Saint Rulers. They are the 4 protectors and the 5 elders. As for the Holy Emperor, I'm the only one. The base of our sect is also a powerful killing formation. It's composed of over 2,000 wooden huts, and the control center of the formation is the Blood Divine Hall at the very center. At the same time, the Blood Divine Hall is where the Sect Master rests. Aside from the Vice Sect Master, anyone who enters the Blood Divine Hall needs the Sect Master's permission." Along the way, Jiang Wang constantly explained the current situation of the Bloodsword sect to Genshin. He started from where they were stationed at the beginning and then moved on to the members scattered around. Genshin finally gained a clear understanding of the structure of the Bloodsword sect. The internal structure of the Bloodsword sect was not complicated. On the contrary, it was extremely simple. The entire organization was controlled by 5 elders, and each of them was in charge of a group. The Vice Sect Master had absolute authority over the 5 elders, and as for the Sect Master, he was a supreme existence in the Bloodsword sect. He could decide anything in the sect. The next day, Jianqin held a ceremony to formally accept the position of sect master in the Blood Divine Hall. The ceremony was very simple. It was presided over by the vice sect master, the 5 elders, and the 4 protectors. All the core members of the sect had to pay their respects. After officially becoming the sect master of the Blood Sword sect, the first thing Jianqin did was hold a meeting. At this moment, Jianshan Nubi's vice sect master Jiangwang, the 5 elders, and the 4 protectors gathered in a secret room within the Blood Divine Hall. They were all stern. Jianqin sat at the very front. He had changed into the special attire of the Blood Sword sect. He wore luxurious, blood-red robes, which gave him a hint of evilness. There are 2 things to be announced in today's meeting. The first is that the Blood Sword sect will return to the Tianyuan continent from today onwards. Jianqin said sternly. Although he rarely gave orders, his words were still filled with an unquestionable dignity. Jiangwang, the 5 elders, and the 4 protectors rejoiced when they heard that, but none of them said anything. Jianqin continued, "The second thing I want to announce is that the underworld sect will be destroyed. If the first matter made the upper echelon of the Blood Sword sect happy, the second matter made them all excited and crazy. In the past few years, the 3 great assassin organizations of the Tianyuan continent had always been fighting openly and secretly. There had been countless small conflicts in the past, so the 3 organizations had formed irreconcilable grievances. 1,000 years ago, the Blood Sword sect had engaged in an unprecedented battle against the Underworld sect and the Yamahal under Houston's lead. Back then, due to Houston's supreme strength, neither the Underworld sect nor the Yamahal were the opponent of the Blood Sword sect. In the end, the 2 organizations worked together and engaged in a battle to the death. The battle was extremely intense. Although the Underworld sect and the Yamahal worked together, Houston was unstoppable. He led the Blood Sword sect to suppress the 2 assassins, forcing the 2 organizations into a desperate situation where they were almost wiped out. In the end, it was the assassins from the Underworld sect and the Yamahal who killed Houston's wife that ended the battle. From then on, the Blood Sword sect vanished from the continent. During that time, the people of the Blood Sword sect had wanted to take revenge on the Underworld sect and the Yamahal many times, but they were unable to do so due to sect master Houston's orders. They could not appear in Tianyuan continent, so they had kept their grievances bottled up for 1,000 years. Now that the new sect master, Jianqin, had finally lifted the ban, how could they not be overjoyed? "Sect master, when do we move?" An elder stood up and excitedly asked, "Since we've already made the decision, we obviously have to move as soon as possible. I also hope that we can avenge Uncle Xiao as soon as possible. May I ask if you know where the Underworld sect is hiding?" Jianqin asked. "Sect master, the Underworld sect's hiding place may be well hidden, but it can't hide from the intelligence hall of our Blood Sword sect. We've already learned about it. We can set off as soon as the sect master gives the order," said Jiangwang. He had been looking forward to this day for a very long time. "If that's the case, we'll set off tomorrow morning. Go prepare today. We'll have an intense battle tomorrow," Jianqin said with a heavy voice. "Sect master, how many people do we need?" An elder asked. "Vice sect master Jiang, 5 elders and 4 protectors can come with me. There's no need to bring anyone below Saint Ruler," Jian Wushuang said. "But sect master, the Underworld sect also has a divine hall. They've been hiding in the divine hall all these years. With the power of our Blood Sword sect, I'm afraid we won't be able to destroy their divine hall," said an elder. Chapter 12:14. As one of the 7 capital cities of the Tianyuan continent, the Holy Emperor's empire was bustling with activity. Most of the people on the streets were wealthy merchants and disciples of extraordinary clans. Occasionally, there would be a few crudely dressed mercenaries among the crowd. Not only was the city of God the territory of one of the 3 great clans that controlled the empire, The Tsar family was also a paradise for Radiant Saint Masters. Not only were most of the Radiant Saint Masters gathered here, but all the Class 7 Radiant Saint Masters on the continent were gathered here as well. Currently, there were over 20 known Class 7 Radiant Saint Masters on the continent, and all of them were elders of the Radiant Saint Master Union. In the center of the City of God, there was a majestic castle that looked like a sleeping beast. It was full of vicissitudes of life. Although the castle was snow-white, its color was a bit old and not bright. It still had the aura of time. The castle was the headquarters of the Radiant Saint Master Union. At this moment, on the 7th floor of the headquarters, the president, Adami, sat on a throne in a lavishly decorated hall. His face was no longer as bright as it had been several years ago. Instead, it was rather haggard. Even the wrinkles on his face had increased, making him seem even older. Esteemed President, Yi Lan requests an audience. At this moment, a rather respectful voice rang out from outside the door. Sir Yi Lan, please come in, the president gently said. With a gentle wave of his right hand, a ball of milky white light flashed in his hand. The tightly shut door was silently opened. A man in a tight suit walked in from the outside. He looked to be in his early 30s, with a pair of deep black eyes that were bright and full of expression, like two black gems. His handsome face was covered with the vicissitudes of life from the wind, frost, snow, and rain. Esteemed President, Yi Lan led a group of people to search for Master Yun Tian under your orders, but we still haven't received any news about him. The young man clasped his hands at the president. Adami frowned as he sat on the throne. He murmured, Yun Tian has already disappeared for several years. I really don't know where he has gone. I've used a secret technique many times, but I still haven't been able to contact him. Has something happened to Yun Tian? The president became gloomy when he thought of this possibility. Yun Tian was his first disciple. He had basically watched Yun Tian grow up. Although they were master and disciple on the surface, Adami had already begun to treat Yun Tian as his own son. As a result, Adami felt rather sorrowful when he thought about how Yun Tian might have met with misfortune. Yi Lan, it's been hard on you these past few days. You should go and rest first. As for Yun Tian, there's no need to look for him. Adami waved his hand gently, his expression somewhat dispirited. Esteemed President, you must take care of yourself. Yi Lan will be taking his leave. Yi Lan's voice was filled with concern before he left silently. Sigh. Adami slumped against the wide and comfortable back of the throne tiredly after Yi Lan's departure. At this moment, Adami could not help but think about some matters of the past. He had taken in a total of 3 disciples in his life. His first disciple had passed away long ago, while his second disciple was Yun Tian, who he had watched grow up. The third disciple he had taken in was the proudest thing in his life. Both of his first 2 disciples were exceptional. They possessed extremely great potential as Radiant Saint Masters, but the difference between them and his third disciple was like the difference between heaven and earth. This was because not only had his third disciple become a Class 7 Radiant Saint Master, but he was also a supreme expert who had shaken up the continent. He possessed an advantage that far surpassed Radiant Saint Masters on the path of cultivation. He was now a renowned holy emperor, where even the 10 protector clans feared him. Unfortunately, the unexpected happened. The third disciple that Adami was extremely proud of had taken away the saint artifact of the Radiant Saint Master Union. He had almost caused the Union to face the threat of collapse. Not only had the loss of the saint artifact caused irreparable damage to the Union, but it had also severed Adami's sliver of hope of becoming a Class 8 Radiant Saint Master. Adami had already entered the twilight years. He originally had a lifespan of 3,000 years. Coupled with the additional 200 years from the 10,000-year-old heavenly resource, he had a total of 3,200 years. He had already used over 3,100 years of his lifespan, so he only had a few dozen years left. Adami had never married, nor did he have any children. He did not have any extravagant wishes in his old age. He only hoped that he would be able to personally witness the Radiant Saint Master Union become even more powerful and glorious in the final moments of his life if he had not reached Class 8. At the same time, he would have a close descendant. Send him off. But now, his final wish had become nothing more than a dream. Let alone becoming even more powerful and glorious, it would already be extremely fortunate for the Union to not decline. It was even more impossible for him to be sent off by a descendant he was close to. His second disciple, Yun Tian, had already gone missing for many years. His third disciple status was no longer the same as before. Even he, the president of the Union, could not befriend him, let alone send him off. I, Adami, have worked my entire life for the glory of the Radiant Saint Master Union. I never thought that after working for the Union for over 2,000 years, not only would I fail to see the Union achieve its glory, I would even cause the Union to fall to my hands. I, Adami, am a sinner of the Union, the President sighed. The President of the Radiant Saint Master Union sighed at the sky. His voice trembled slightly and was filled with misery. Tears even flickered in his old eyes. In a deep mountain thousands of miles away from the city of God, a small wooden hut stood alone on a mountain peak. Inside the hut, Zarkayun was still lying on the bed with her eyes closed. She had been unconscious for many years and still hadn't woken up. Kayin, do you remember when we first met in the city of God? Back then, I was only an Earth Saint Master and was chased into the city of God by an evil person. I was heavily injured, and my space ring had been taken away, so I was penniless. At the same time, I was unbearably thirsty. Without any other choice, I stole a set of clean clothes from a small family and changed into them. Afterward, I dragged my exhausted body to an inn to eat and drink. In the end, when I was paying the bill, I had originally planned on taking a beating in exchange for some money, but I never thought that you would suddenly appear at that crucial moment. Back then, you were so beautiful, like a fairy from the heavens. From the first moment I saw you, I was deeply attracted to you. Back then, I still didn't know who you were. Not only did you help me pay the bill, but you could tell with a single glance that I was heavily injured as well. You gave me an extremely precious Class 6 Radiant Spirit Pill and constantly chatted with me. From that moment onwards, we became friends. I still remember how furious you were when you learned that I had been hunted down by an evil person. Afterward, you left the city with me to find that evil person. We worked together to kill that evil person. Hao gently spoke as he held Zarkayun's hand. Reminiscence and nostalgia filled his eyes. Zarkayun had been unconscious for several years, and he had also stayed with her for several years. He had not left for even a single moment. Kayun, do you still remember the promise we made back then? You said that once we were powerful enough, we would travel to the ends of the world and travel the entire continent. Kayun, wake up. Let's fulfill our promise back then. On a lone island several million kilometers away from the Tianyuan continent, a barefoot, disheveled, beggar-like person in tattered clothes crouched on the ground as he wolfed down a raw fish in his hand. Eat, 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 eat. Yang Yutian, I want to eat you. I want to eat your flesh and drink your blood. Ha ha ha, isn't it painful? Cry out, cry out, cry out, cry out and struggle. Before me, Master Yin Tian, it doesn't matter how you struggle. You'll still end up as food in the end. The beggar-like person wolfed down the raw fish in his hand as he mumbled to himself in a rather crazy manner. He would giggle foolishly from time to time. With a plop, a splash appeared on the shore. A huge fish over 2 feet long had accidentally leaped onto the shore. It struggled desperately in an attempt to return to the water. The eyes of the man who was wolfing down the raw fish suddenly lit up. He threw away the unfinished fish in his hand and exclaimed, Yang Yutian, don't run. As he spoke, he quickly ran forward and pounced forward. pressing the big fish that was about to return to the water under his body. A stone on the ground made intimate contact with his mouth, causing blood to flow from his nose and mouth. However, he didn't seem to feel any pain. He opened his mouth and spat out 2 broken teeth and a mouthful of dirty blood. He laughed foolishly in excitement. Yang Yutian, I've caught you. I've caught you. Let's see how you're going to run now. In front of me, Master Yun Tian. Even if you have 3 heads and 6 arms, you won't be able to escape from my grasp. I want to eat your flesh and drink your blood. He used his 2 heads to grab the fish that was under his chest. The fish immediately struggled with all its might in his hands, its mouth constantly opening and closing. Seeing this, Yun Tian became even more excited. He laughed loudly and said, Yang Yutian, I didn't think that you would have a day like this. Struggle, struggle with all your might. Scream out loud, scream, scream, beg for mercy. If you beg me, Master Yun Tian, to spare you, perhaps I'll spare your life. Yang Yutian, why aren't you saying anything? Why aren't you begging for mercy? Chapter 12:15. In the past, the magical beasts had invaded the Tianyuan continent en masse because of the winged tiger, but they were stopped by the experts of the Tianyuan continent. The 2 sides reached an agreement, and the magical beasts all settled down on the small island temporarily. Afterwards, Yun Tian left the Radiant Saint Master Union and traveled overseas with the winged tiger. He wanted to find the magical beasts and tell them that the winged tiger was on Genshin so that they could harm Genshin. However, after flying for a few days, Yun Tian fainted from exhaustion. Just as he was about to die in the sea, a beast race powerhouse happened to pass by, picked him up from the sea, and brought him back to this small island. After learning about the winged tiger from Yang Yutian, the magical beast immediately set off for the Tianyuan continent again. They had forgotten about Yun Tian. Since the island was extremely far away from the Tianyuan continent and Yun Tian was unable to determine the direction of the vast sea, he had no idea where the Tianyuan continent was. Coupled with his weak strength, he was unable to travel through the sea, so he was trapped on the small island. In the beginning, Yun Tian could still deal with it normally, but as time went on, he became rather unbearable. In the end, he became insane. The next morning, Genshin led the vice sect master, the 5 elders, and the 4 protectors to the hiding spot of the underworld sect. Newbies obviously went with Genshin. The vice sect master, Jiang Wang, had personally investigated the hiding spot of the underworld sect, so he had left behind some coordinates there. Genshin's group directly arrived at the hiding spot of the underworld sect through a space gate constructed by Jiang Wang. This was a yellow world. As far as the eye could see, it was a vast expanse of yellow sand. There was no end in sight. The scorching sun hung high in the sky, emitting a scorching heat that baked the earth until it was boiling hot. Genshin, newbies, Jiang Wang, the 5 elders, and the 4 protectors hovered 1,000 meters in the air at ease. They looked down at the ground from above. The harsh weather of the desert did not affect them at all. Sect Master, in order to avoid being discovered by the experts of the underworld sect, I chose a space gate 1,000 kilometers away from the underworld sect. There's a region of loose sand 1,000 kilometers up ahead. The divine hall of the underworld sect is hidden under the sand, Jiang Wang explained to Genshin. Genshin immediately looked up ahead. He nodded slightly and said, "Let's go." Afterward, Genshin and everyone began to fly 1,000 kilometers away. The 4 protectors who were the weakest in the group were all at the 5th heavenly layer of saint rulers. Their comprehension of space was quite high, so they flew extremely quickly. The distance of 1,000 kilometers was covered in less than half an hour. When Genshin arrived at the region of sand that Jiang Wang had mentioned, he immediately extended the senses of his soul. Sure enough, he discovered a huge divine hall standing silently under the soft sand below him. Chen's eyes turned cold. He had already destroyed the Yama Hall of the 2 major culprits who had tried to assassinate Uncle Xiu's wife, so only the underworld sect remained. Jianqin no longer hesitated. A powerful killing intent radiated from his body as the Emperor armament silently appeared in his hand. A dark, gray mist coiled around it as it radiated with a violent presence of destruction. Jianqin and the 5 elders shivered inside. The killing intent radiating from Jianqin made them shiver. They had finally witnessed Jianqin's strength with their own eyes. They all thought that the rumors were true. This was because their understanding of Jianqin's strength was still based on the rumors on the Tianyuan continent. None of them knew just how much of the rumors were false. Jianqin swung his sword, and a black sword qi as thick as an arm shot through the air like a bolt of lightning. It sank into the loose sand below in a single moment. The sword qi possessed the might of the 7th heavenly layer of the Holy Emperor. It directly struck the divine hall 100 meters below the sand. Although it was nowhere near enough to destroy the divine hall, it was enough to shake it. The divine hall violently shook, rousing everyone within. The next moment, a black figure shot out of the divine hall with lightning-like speed. It charged out of the desert with a powerful presence and faced off against Jianqin's group. It was a person completely wrapped in black robes. Their appearance was obscured, and it was impossible to tell if they were male or female. The presence they gave off had already reached the 5th heavenly layer of the Holy Emperor. "Who are you? Why are you provoking my underworld sect?" The person in black robes asked with a deep voice. His voice was hoarse, and it was neither male nor female. "Ha ha ha, Luo Qi, isn't your memory a little too bad? It's only been 1,000 years, yet you've already forgotten your old friend," sneered Jiangwang. "Jiangwang, it's actually you. You're from the Blood Sword sect." The black-robed person's voice was filled with surprise. He then continued, "Isn't the Blood Sword sect a hermit that doesn't care about anything on the Tianyuan continent? May I ask why you've mustered so many people today?" "Luo Qi, this is the new sect master of our Blood Sword sect. Under the sect master's orders, our Blood Sword sect has returned, and your underworld sect will be the sacrificial offering for our return." Jiang Wang laughed aloud. "Humph, your Blood Sword sect doesn't have the right to wipe out my underworld sect," sneered the black-robed person. His voice was filled with disdain. "It's not up to you to decide whether we have the right or not." Jianqin coldly replied. He stepped through the air and arrived beside the black-robed person with a single step. The Emperor armament stabbed toward the black-robed person's head. The black-robed person was secretly surprised when he sensed the might of Jianqin's attack. However, he did not slow down at all. Darkness-attributed Saint Force surged out from his hand, condensing into a small, black dagger in an instant. He advanced instead of retreating, dodging Jianqin's attack with a tilt of his head. The dagger in his hand was like a cold, venomous snake, silently stabbing toward Jianqin's forehead as a black streak of light. Jianqin sneered disdainfully. With a twist of his wrist, the sword that had stabbed through the air directly swung toward the black-robed person's head. If the speed of Jianqin's first attack could be described as nothing special, then the current attack toward the black-robed person's head was unbelievably fast. As the sword tore through the air, a pitch-black crack appeared in space. The black-robed person was shocked. Jianqin's attack was just too fast. Even with his strength at the 5th heavenly layer of the Holy Emperor, he had almost failed to react in time. It was already too late for him to dodge, so he could only change the direction of his dagger toward Jianqin's Emperor armament. When the two of them collided, a rumbling sound immediately erupted. A powerful energy shockwave spread out in all directions with the two of them as the epicenter of their battle. Jianqin's attack possessed the might of the 7th heavenly layer of the Holy Emperor, so it was impossible for the black-robed person to block it with his strength at the 5th heavenly layer of the Holy Emperor. He was immediately blown away. The new sect master of the Blood Sword sect is so powerful. He's actually reached the 7th heavenly layer. Aside from the old sect master who's still in seclusion, No one in my underworld sect is his opponent. The black-robed person was secretly shocked. The black-robed man was secretly shocked. He immediately stopped fighting and quickly rushed underground. As long as he returned to the divine palace, he would be in an invincible position. However, as soon as he moved, a bone-chilling coldness swept over. All he saw was Genshin appear beside him like a ghost. The Emperor armament pulsed with black light as it stabbed toward him with lightning-like speed. The tip of the sword was less than 3 inches away from his forehead. At such a close distance, the black-robed person could even feel the pain coming from his soul. He felt a piercing pain, as if his soul was about to be ripped apart. The black-robed person was shocked. Other than Houston 1,000 years ago, this was the first time he had felt the threat of death in so many years. In that critical moment, the black-robed person spat out a mouthful of dense, black mist. He yelled out, "Darkness Saint Technique, after-image clone!" With that, Genshin's Emperor armament stabbed into the black-robed person's forehead with lightning-like speed. However, Genshin did not rejoice. Instead, he frowned. His attack had failed. Bang! As soon as Genshin thought of that, the black-robed person loudly exploded. He turned into a dense, black mist that rapidly expanded, enveloping Genshin. The black mist was clearly no ordinary mist. It was condensed from darkness-attributed saint force. Even with Genshin's eyesight, he was unable to see anything within the mist. He could not even see his fingers. Suddenly, a small, black dagger silently appeared behind Genshin. The dagger had completely fused with the black mist, so it would be difficult to notice it no matter how great one's eyesight was. However, before the dagger could attack Genshin from behind, Genshin suddenly turned around and swung his Emperor armament without any hesitation. The chaotic force wrapped around the Emperor armament shattered space. The strike was extremely powerful, affecting the space in a radius of 100 meters. The entire space violently pulsed. Arg! With a painful cry, the small dagger that had appeared behind Genshin fell from the sky with a bloody arm before it could launch a fatal attack on Genshin. Not only did the black-robed man who wanted to assassinate Genshin fail in his sneak attack, but he even lost an arm. The black mist around Genshin slowly dispersed, and Genshin's figure gradually appeared before the people of the Blood Sword sect. However, the black-robed person was nowhere to be found. The vice sect master and the 5 elders could not help but let out a sigh of relief when they saw that Genshin was fine. Although they knew that Genshin was very powerful, he had faced an expert from the underworld sect who specialized in assassination. He could have died if he had been careless. "Sect master, are you fine? Where's Luo Qi?" Jiang Wang arrived beside Genshin and asked in concern. Genshin remained calm and composed. He gently shook his head and said, "He's not a threat to me at all, but he fled pretty quickly. After I cut off his arm, he immediately fled into the desert. He went into the divine hall." Genshin spoke calmly, but Jiang Wang and the 5 elders were secretly shocked. An expert from the underworld sect, who had reached the 5th heavenly layer of the Holy Emperor and specialized in assassination, was not a threat to him at all. They were once again convinced by Genshin's great strength. Chapter 12:16. Suddenly, the yellow sand below began to violently undulate. A divine temple broke through the yellow sand and slowly rose up from below with a great power. That's the darkness divine hall of the underworld sect. Jiang Wang immediately cried out when he saw the huge divine hall slowly rise up from the sand. He became stern as well. Although they knew that Genshin had a way to destroy the divine hall, the indestructible defenses of the divine hall still pressured them greatly. This was because if they could not destroy the divine hall, they would not be able to harm the assassins hiding in there. They needed the strength of a saint emperor to destroy the divine hall. Every single divine hall on the Tianyuan continent was created by a holy emperor. They possessed the power of the holy emperor. Although the power could not be used to harm the people outside the divine hall, It could provide the divine hall with the greatest defense. It was not something that a holy emperor could destroy. Even a holy emperor at great perfection would not be able to do so. My underworld sect has existed on the Tianyuan continent for several tens of thousands of years. How can a mere blood sword sect like you destroy us? Even Houston from 1,000 years ago was unable to destroy my underworld sect with his supreme strength. I'd like to see just how you plan on destroying my underworld sect today. Luo Chi's voice rang out from within the divine hall. Luo Chi's furious voice rang out from the huge divine hall. The divine hall rapidly expanded under his control before flying above their heads. It crushed down on them with a tremendous pressure. Jianqin sneered. A piece of jade had already silently appeared in his hand. With a slight squeeze, the jade was crushed to pieces. Sect Master, retreat! Jiang Wang said to Jianqin before quickly retreating with the 5 elders and 4 protectors. They wanted to leave the range of the divine hall. Although the divine hall did not possess any offensive power, none of them wanted to be smashed into the sand by it. However, just when Jiang Wang and the others had retreated several dozen steps and had yet to leave the range of the divine hall, a spatial force suddenly appeared near Jianqin. 10 meters away from Jianqin, the space there violently pulsed. In the next moment, a crack was ripped open, forming a colorful space gate. Almost the moment the space gate formed, a tremendous pressure surged out of the space gate in a blanket manner, filling the entire region. The air seemed to stop flowing before the tremendous pressure. Even the space there became viscous. The experts of the Bloodsword sect, who were retreating nearby, all came to a halt, other than Jiang Wang, who was at the 3rd heavenly layer of Saint King. The 5 elders and protectors all felt like they were about to suffocate. They did not even have the ability to breathe properly before the tremendous pressure. Apart from the 4 protectors, Jiang Wang and the 5 elders were all shocked. The pressure was far greater than what the sect Master Houston had faced in the past, making them think that they were facing an expert at the level of the Holy Emperor. The divine hall above them continued to rapidly descend. The huge base of the divine hall loomed over them like a dark cloud, blotting out the sun. At the same time, Ruijin, Honglian, and Blackfish emerged from the space gate side by side. As soon as they arrived, they discovered the divine hall that was rapidly descending above them. A sliver of disdain immediately appeared in their eyes. Ruijin slowly raised his hand and used his right hand to support the divine hall above him. With a muffled sound, Ruijin's hand made contact with the divine hall. The divine hall actually came to a halt. The divine hall was actually stopped in the air by a single hand from Ruijin. The eyes of Jiang Wang, the 5 elders, and the 4 protectors all narrowed when they saw this. Stopping an entire divine hall with a single hand was definitely not something a great perfection expert like the Holy Emperor could do. At that moment, Jiang Wang and the 5 elders were stunned by Ruijin's supreme strength. Although they had heard rumors that Jianqin had 3 supreme experts who were no weaker than the Holy Emperor by his side, that was just a rumor after all. They all believed that the rumors were exaggerated, but now that they had seen it for themselves, the rumors were indeed true. To be able to stop a rapidly descending divine hall with a single hand and still maintain a calm demeanor, only the Holy Emperor could do something like that. Aside from the 4 protectors of the Bloodsword sect who had seen Ruijin's group in action, Jiang Wang and the 5 elders' gazes toward Ruijin's group underwent a drastic change. They did not hide their respect at all. At this moment, Ruijin's hand suddenly shook and immediately erupted with a thunderous rumble. The divine hall actually flew high into the air from the shake. The Holy Emperor? You're the Holy Emperor? Impossible, this is impossible. Aside from the Path Lord of Carnal Desires, there's no other Holy Emperor on the Tianyuan continent. Luo Chi's voice rang out in Jiang Wang's head. Luo Chi's terrified voice rang out from the divine hall. However, he soon seemed to think of something and could not help but cry out, "I know." You're the three magical beasts that follow the captain of the flame mercenaries. No one paid any attention to Luo Qi, even though he was a fifth heavenly layer, holy emperor. At the same time, a dazzling golden light suddenly appeared. Rui Jin had drawn the sacred dragon's sword above his head. Rui Jin gripped the sword as his presence rapidly skyrocketed. He directly swung the sword at the divine hall. 100-meter-long strand of golden sword chi appeared as soon as he swung the sword. It was filled with origin energy. This was a power that only those who had surpassed the Holy Emperor and reached the origin realm could control. Even the Holy Emperor needed to avoid it. The 100-meter-long strand of golden sword chi struck the divine hall, immediately causing it to rumble. The entire divine hall violently shook before being cleaved in half under the disbelieving gazes of Genshin and the experts of the Blood Sword sect. The divine hall of the underworld sect had actually been cleaved apart by a single strike from Ruijin. No, impossible, this is impossible. Luo Qi's cry of shock and disbelief rang out from the shattered Darkness Divine Palace. The Darkness Divine Palace had always been the underworld sect's greatest reliance. It was their greatest means of survival. Now, it had actually been split into two by the enemy's sword. Such terrifying divine might made Luo Qi tremble in fear. Hong Lian and Blackfish were also secretly stunned as they stared at the fallen divine hall. Although the two of them could still smash through the divine hall with the power of their origin energy weapons, they definitely could not do it as easily as Ruijin, cleaving the divine hall in half with a single strike. Ruijin, you should be breaking through soon. Hong Lian suddenly turned her head and stared at Ruijin. A red light flickered in her eyes, as if flames were leaping about. Ruijin put away the sacred dragon's sword and said indifferently, I've already touched on that barrier. I believe I can become a Saint Emperor in 50 years. Jianshan was surprised when he heard that, but he soon became overjoyed. He said excitedly, Senior Ruijin, you're about to become a holy emperor? Ruijin smiled when he saw how excited Jianshan was. He said, the reason why there are so few holy emperors in the world right now is none other than the lack of origin energy. My sacred dragon's sword and sacred dragon's armor both contain origin energy, so breaking through to become a holy emperor obviously won't be a problem. It's the same for Hong Lian and Blackfish. All we lack is time. Jianshan sucked in a deep breath and slowly calmed himself down. However, he was unable to suppress the joy in his heart, as if he could already see Ruijin and the other two becoming holy emperor in several decades. Boom! Boom! At this moment, two booms rang out nearby. The divine hall that had been cleaved in half by Ruijin could no longer remain airborne, so it fell into the desert. Countless black-robed assassins quickly charged out of the ruined divine hall, fleeing into the distance as quickly as they could. Don't let a single one of them escape. Kill! Jianshan's eyes turned cold. He immediately ordered the experts of the Blood Sword sect before using the illusory flash to arrive above the divine hall. The Emperor armament turned into a net of swords that enveloped the assassins who had just emerged from the divine hall, killing them in the blink of an eye. Vice sect leader Jiangwang, the 5 elders, and the 4 protectors all moved to hunt down the fleeing assassins of the underworld sect. Although they were saint rulers and could not commit too many killings, they could not care less if they wanted to destroy the underworld sect in a single stroke. Even if they killed too many people and triggered celestial decay, it was built on the fact that they had killed hundreds of thousands or even more people. The underworld sect only had a few thousand people right now, and all of them were assassins whose hands were stained with blood. As saint rulers, they did not need to worry about celestial decay at all. The destruction of the underworld sect's greatest reliance, the Darkness Shrine, had also left a huge psychological shadow on the many assassins of the underworld sect. Their morale was low, and they no longer had the courage to fight. As soon as they rushed out of the shrine, they immediately fled as far as they could. Jiangwang, the 5 elders, and the 4 protectors all unleashed their full strength to kill the fleeing assassins of the underworld sect. Below Saint Ruler, all of them were ants. Even Heaven Saint Masters were powerless before their Saint Ruler abilities. With a single thought, they could freeze a region of space, trapping several or even more assassins and killing them effortlessly. At this moment, more than 10 black-robed men, dressed like the assassins of the underworld sect, rushed out of the temple among the crowd. As soon as they arrived outside, their figures merged with the space and turned into a series of afterimages, escaping at an unbelievable speed. It's the Saint Rulers of the underworld sect. Don't let a single one of them escape. Jiangwang bellowed out. He abandoned the immobilized Heaven Saint Masters that he had frozen in space and chased after a 9th heavenly layer Saint Ruler. The 5 elders and 4 protectors of the Blood Sword sect all abandoned the small fries in their hands and chased after the fleeing Saint Rulers of the underworld sect. Ruijin suddenly formed a seal with his hands and called out, "Secret technique of the Dragon Clan, Dragon's Domain." With that, a ring of golden light expanded from Ruijin and rapidly expanded. It expanded in all directions at an unbelievable speed, enveloping a radius of over 1,000 kilometers in the blink of an eye. Chapter 1217. Ruijin's Dragon's Domain covered a radius of 1,000 kilometers. Only a few seconds had passed since the divine hall of the underworld sect had been destroyed, so even Saint Rulers would not be able to cross that distance in such a short amount of time. As a result, as soon as the dragon's domain formed, it enveloped all the assassins of the underworld sect. No one managed to escape. The vice sect master of the Blood Sword sect, Jiangwang, the 5 elders, and the 4 protectors all caught up to the Saint Ruler assassins of the underworld sect. They attacked without holding back at all. The Saint Rulers of the underworld sect all possessed darkness-attributed saint force. As soon as the battle began, they all erupted with a dense, black mist using a secret technique, enveloping a certain range of space. They silently moved through the black mist, constantly searching for good opportunities to launch sneak attacks on the experts of the Blood Sword sect. The Saint Rulers of the underworld sect mainly used darkness-attributed saint force to aid in their assassination, while the experts of the Blood Sword sect used baleful Een force as their trump card. They both had their own strengths. However, the people of the Blood Sword sect did not use baleful Een force in their battle. Baleful Een force could only be cultivated through slaughter, so it was far too precious to Saint Rulers. Even with that being the case, the experts of the Blood Sword sect still gained the upper hand because they were not affected by the dragon's domain at all. On the other hand, the Saint Rulers of the underworld sect were suppressed by the dragon's domain, so they struggled to use 70 to 80% of their strength. Bang! With a muffled sound, Jiangwang, who was at the 3rd heavenly layer of the Holy Emperor, casually struck the head of a Saint Ruler from the underworld sect. The Saint Ruler's head exploded on the spot, wiping out his soul. At the same time, a 9th heavenly layer elder of the Blood Sword sect killed a Saint Ruler from the underworld sect. A blood-red spike pierced the Saint Ruler's forehead and emerged from the back of his head. It pierced through his head, wiping out his soul before it could escape. Jianqin did not attack anymore. Instead, he stood with newbies and scanned the surroundings with a sharp gaze. He planned on leaving all the Saint Ruler assassins to Jiangwang and the others. He could not be bothered to personally deal with the assassins below Saint Ruler. Strange, Jianqin, why don't I see the guy whose arm you cut off? Newbies crossed his arms as he hovered in the air beside Jianqin, his eyes constantly searching around. Jianqin frowned slightly. He had also been waiting for Luo Qi here, but until now he had not discovered that Luo Qi had escaped from the shrine. Although the shrine was broken, the power of the shrine had not completely dissipated, so his consciousness was still unable to enter the shrine. Could it be that Luo Qi is still hiding in the shrine? Jianqin murmured to himself. Although several thousand similarly dressed assassins had charged out of the shrine, None of them could escape his eyes with the senses of his soul. Luo Qi was nowhere to be found. I'll go have a look inside the shrine. Jianqin said before directly flying into the shrine. Newbies followed him in as well. The shrine was filled with darkness. The darkness attributed saint force that filled the place was extremely dense. To people who cultivated darkness attributed saint force, they would be able to achieve twice the results with half the effort if they cultivated here. However, since the shrine was broken, the darkness attributed saint force that filled the shrine was slowly dispersing. Even the power within the shrine was rapidly draining away. Jianqin and Newbies stood in the dark shrine. They both frowned slightly because even the two of them were affected by the darkness. They could not see more than 5 meters. Humph! How can mere darkness-attributed saint force stump me, the great Newbies? Newbies snorted coldly. Immediately, a dazzling golden light shone from his body, making him seem like a miniature sun in the dark shrine. The darkness-attributed saint force that flowed through the shrine dispersed as soon as it came in contact with the golden light. In the blink of an eye, the shrine that had been shrouded in darkness cleared up. This was a splendidly decorated hall. The hall was empty, with only a few expensive decorations. Jianqin directly ignored the decorations. He glanced around and said, Luo Qi must still be hiding in the shrine. Let's look around first. We can't let him escape, or there'll be endless problems. Ruijin and the other 2 seniors are standing guard outside, so we don't need to worry about Luo Qi escaping from another part of the shrine after we enter. Jianqin and Newbies began to search around the shrine. A small portion of the shrine's power remained on the walls, so Jianqin was unable to see through it with the senses of his soul. As a result, they could only search slowly. Along the way, Jianqin came across passageways that had suddenly appeared, as well as formations that hid the surroundings. However, they were all destroyed by him and Newbies. The toughness of the Divine Hall and the formations hidden within were all supported by the power of the Divine Hall. Now that the power of the Divine Hall was gradually dispersing, both the formations and the sturdiness of the Divine Hall had greatly weakened. At this moment, in an extremely well-hidden secret room in the shrine, a person with a single arm and cloaked in black robes was with a short old man. The short old man was rather pale, but his eyes were brimming with life. Luo Qi, 2 people have already entered the shrine. They'll find this place before long. We need to leave as soon as possible, the short old man said emotionlessly with a deep voice. Old sect master, are we just going to leave the rest of the people in the underworld sect behind? Luo Qi asked with a hoarse voice. Since they can destroy the shrine in a single strike, they must have an expert at the same level as the Holy Emperor. Before an expert like that, I wouldn't be able to resist at all, not to mention that I've yet to recover from my injuries. This baleful force really is powerful. 1,000 years ago, my soul was injured by Houston's baleful force. Even after 1,000 years of recuperation, my soul still hasn't recovered, the short old man said coldly. His voice was filled with deep hatred. Old sect master, all the people from the Bloodsword sect are outside the shrine right now. There are also 3 terrifying magical beasts. They'll definitely discover us as soon as we leave. How are we supposed to leave? Luo Qi asked. I already know about the situation outside. An expert has already enveloped a radius of 1,000 kilometers with a supreme secret technique. We definitely can't leave. Fortunately, we still have a backup plan, or we might have died here today, the short old man said in a deep voice. Afterward, surging darkness-attributed saint force poured into the ground from beneath his feet. Gradually, an extremely complicated formation appeared beneath their feet. This is a space gate. Old sect master, can we use a space gate to leave the shrine? Can't the space within the shrine be ripped open? Luo Qi asked in doubt. The short old man sneered with that. This isn't a space gate. It's an ancient teleportation formation. The sect master of the underworld sect obtained it by accident several tens of thousand years ago and cast it down here. It's all for the sake of preventing a destructive attack from our enemies in the future, allowing us to escape. At the same time, the teleportation formation will shatter once it's used, so we don't have to worry about being followed. Luo Qi rejoiced inside. He said, "Old sect master, I'll go get the Saint Tier battle skill first before leaving." "There's no time. The two of them aren't far from here. We need to leave immediately or we won't be able to leave if they destroy the formation," said the short old man. The teleportation formation was activated very soon. With a violent ripple of space, Luo Qi and the short old man vanished as well. Several hundred meters away from the secret room, Jianchen and newbies were searching in this direction. The power of the shrine was much thinner than before, so Jianchen's soul could barely penetrate a few buildings. Just as Luo Qi and the short old man left through the teleportation formation, Jianchen's face changed. He suddenly sensed an extremely weak ripple of space with the senses of his soul, so he quickly ran in the direction of the ripple without any hesitation. Boom! Arriving at the location of the ripple of space, Jianchen smashed through the door of a secret room with a single stroke of his sword. Without the obstruction of the door, the ripple of space in the secret room became even more intense. However, there was no one in the secret room anymore. There was only a damaged formation on the ground. Jianchen sighed inside when he saw the formation. He said, "We've come too late. Someone has already left through here. I never thought that they would be able to leave through a space gate in the Divine Hall." Newbies' face became rather sunken. He knew extremely well what it meant for a holy emperor of the fifth heavenly layer to escape. It would be an extremely troublesome matter if this person decided to take revenge regardless of the consequences, not to mention that this person was an assassin of the Holy Emperor who was skilled at assassination. "Jianchen, what do we do?" Newbies' expression was very ugly. His relationship with Jianchen had already developed to that of a close friend, so he obviously treated Jianchen's matters as his own. Jianchen furrowed his brows in thought before relaxing. His greatest worry was Changyang Prefecture and his friends in the Flame Mercenaries. However, Changyang Prefecture had Changyang Zushao, who was comparable to the Holy Emperor at great perfection. It could be said that the entire kingdom of Jessen was impregnable. As for the Flame Mercenaries, he planned to ask Ruijin, Heiyu and Heiyu, or you would be fine as well. As long as he placed the Bright Moon Divine Hall in the Flame Mercenaries, he would not need to worry about Bai Lian and the others. Afterwards, Jianchen and newbies searched through the Divine Hall. Very soon, they found a huge stone slab embedded in the wall of a secret room. To Jianchen's surprise, it was actually a complete Saint Tier battle skill. Jianchen began to collect the Saint Tier battle skill without any hesitation. After expending a tremendous amount of effort, he finally removed the huge slab. Although the slab was only 5 meters long, it was extraordinarily heavy. It was countless times heavier than steel, so even with Jianchen's strength he needed to expend quite a lot of effort to lift it. The Saint Tier battle skill on the slab was a fist technique, so it did not suit Jianchen. At the same time, the path that Jianchen walked was different from the cultivators of the Tian Yuan continent. Chapter 1218. After taking away the Saint Tier battle skill, Jianchen and newbies searched through the Divine Hall again. Unfortunately, they did not find anything else. However, Jianchen was already very satisfied. After all, a complete Saint Tier battle skill was the greatest harvest. Jianchen and newbies emerged from the Divine Hall and returned to Ruijin's side. They saw that the experts of the Blood Sword sect had already been waiting there for quite some time. They had already killed off the several thousand assassins from the Underworld sect. "Sect Master, why don't I see Luo Qi?" And the Sect Master of the Underworld sect, Guzhen, I also suspect that he's still alive. He's probably still hiding in the Divine Hall, Jiang Wang said respectfully. Jiang Wang asked in a respectful tone. He was surprised that he didn't see Luo Qi's corpse. "They've escaped. I never thought that they'd hide a space gate in the Divine Hall. Jianchen said with some pity. Rui Jin frowned slightly when he heard that. Spatial gates can't be formed at all in my dragon dimension. So how could they have possibly used them to flee? I'll go check where they set up the space gate. With that, Rui Jin directly entered the dilapidated divine hall. Jianchen and the others followed behind him. Rui Jin, Hong Lian, Blackfish, and Jianchen all stood around the room in which Luo Qi and the old man had fled. They studied the formation on the ground. This isn't a space gate. Hong Lian stared at the formation on the ground and discovered that something was wrong very soon. Although a fixed space gate seemed rather similar to the formation on the ground, there was an extremely clear difference between the two. Correct, this isn't a space gate. It's an ancient teleportation formation. I never thought that something like this would still exist. No wonder they could escape from my dragon's domain, Ruijin said. An ancient teleportation formation. Jianchen murmured. His face was filled with curiosity. Even Jiangwang and newbies became doubtful. Ruijin explained, I found the information about ancient teleportation formations in my inherited memories. These teleportation formations have only appeared in ancient times. They're extremely valuable because not only do they have the same function as space gates, which can teleport a certain number of people or items to another place, but they don't have to worry about the effects of space at all. They can be used even in heavily distorted space or shattered space. They can teleport extremely far away and they can break through all spatial obstructions. They're much more powerful than space gates. However, according to the records in my inherited memories, these teleportation formations were extremely rare even in ancient times. No one knew where they came from, and no one could create them. This is because the requirements to create a teleportation formation are extremely high. First of all, one needs to have reached the pinnacle of formations. Secondly, one needs to have an extremely high comprehension of space. No one has been able to fulfill these two conditions in ancient times, especially when it comes to comprehension of space. Even experts like the Holy Emperor are nowhere close to achieving that. The teleportation formations that appeared in ancient times seem to appear out of thin air. Every time one is used, one is gone. I never thought that I would actually see one here today. I never thought that the underworld sect would be able to obtain such a valuable ancient teleportation formation. Looks like they're not fated to die today. Jianchen could sense that ever since he learned about the ancient teleportation formation, he knew that he could not stop them from leaving today. The sect master of the underworld sect from 1,000 years ago, Guzhen, is most likely still alive. It looks like he left with Luo Qi. I wonder if Guzhen has fully recovered from his injuries, or if his strength has improved. 1,000 years ago, Guzhen was a holy emperor at the 8th heavenly layer. If he fully recovers, he'll be a problem, Jiangwang said worriedly. Vice sect master, there's no need to worry. Uncle Xiao has given the blood divine hall to me. I'll give it to you later. With the blood divine hall, even if the sect master fully recovers, he won't be able to do anything to you, Jianchen said. Afterwards, Jianchen's group did not stay for long. They left the desert very soon. The several thousand space rings that they had plundered from the assassins were all given to Jianchen. However, Jianchen only went through them in a hurry. Seeing that there was nothing he needed, he gave them all to Jiangwang to deal with. Although there was quite a lot of money in the space rings, money no longer had much meaning to Jianchen. Jianchen did not return to the Blood Sword sect's encampment. He gave the Blood Divine Hall that Uncle Xiao had given him to Vice Sect Master Jiangwang before returning to Changyang Prefecture with Ruijin and the others. Since they had confirmed that at least 2 holy emperors had escaped from the underworld sect, the Blood Sword sect needed to be prepared to protect themselves. Right now, Jiangwang was the only holy emperor in the sect, and he was at the 3rd heavenly layer. He was not the opponent of the holy emperor who had escaped from the underworld sect. As a result, leaving the divine hall to Jiangwang could prevent Luo Qi and Guzhen from taking revenge. After returning to Changyang Prefecture, Jianchen thought about it. In the end, he decided to call Yu Yu over to the Flame mercenaries for a while. Yu Yu's strength was still lacking, but considering that Yu Yu had a powerful master, it would clearly be safer. Rui Jin and the others had already helped him enough during this period of time, so Genshin really could not bring himself to call Rui Jin and the others over to the Flame mercenaries. Genshin had also sent out all the spies of the Blood Sword sect to search for the experts who had escaped from the Underworld sect. Although Genshin knew that it was basically a waste of effort, he was unwilling to give up even if there was a sliver of hope. He would not be able to rest until the Holy Emperor who had escaped from the Underworld sect was killed. In the past 2 days, the hottest topic on the Tianyuan continent was the Blood Sword sect. The Blood Sword sect that had vanished for 1,000 years had actually reappeared on the Tianyuan continent. Not only did it attract the attention of many organizations, but it also did something that shocked countless people. The secret bases of the Underworld sect, scattered across the continent, were found one by the Blood Sword sect before being massacred. Not long after this matter, an even more shocking piece of news swept through the continent in an extremely short amount of time. The Underworld sect, one of the 3 great assassin organizations that had existed for over 100,000 years, had actually been destroyed by the Blood Sword sect, shocking countless people. The disturbance caused by this matter was so great that it even alarmed Mercenary City and the 3 empires. After all, the Blood Sword sect was a great organization that was no weaker than an ancient clan. Coupled with Houston, who was at great perfection as the Holy Emperor, there were supreme existences even among ancient clans. It was impossible for such a great organization to not cause a stir when they suddenly returned. Genshin did not pay attention to the disturbance the Blood Sword sect had caused on the Tianyuan continent as he remained in the Changyang prefecture. He currently sat in a pavilion in the garden with his aunt. Yu Fengyan's eyes were red and swollen while her face was covered in tears. She constantly wiped away her tears with a handkerchief in her hand. She had already missed her daughter for many years, ever since Changyang Mingyue had returned once, when Genshin had been forced to leave the Tianyuan continent. There had not been any news from her for so many years. This made Yu Fengyan extremely worried as she only had one daughter. She basically thought about her daughter all the time. She had become much more haggard after all these years of longing. In particular, Yu Fengyan's longing for her daughter had reached an unprecedented level after Changyang, whose return. She finally could not help but come find Genshin. Xiangtian, second aunt, knows that you're now a peerless expert whose name shakes the entire continent. However, second aunt misses Mingyu so much. Can you take your aunt to see Mingyu? Chapter 1219. Genshin felt rather sad when he saw how sorrowful Yu Fengyan was. Yu Fengyan held an extremely important position in his heart. Her status was even higher than his father, Changyang Ba. This was because when he was young, the only person who cared about him the most in Changyang Prefecture was his aunt, Yu Fengyan, other than his mother. Even his father, Changyang Ba, did not care for him as much as Yu Fengyan, especially after the Saint Force test. When Genshin was found to be unable to cultivate Saint Force and was a cripple, Changyang Ba rarely visited him. Back then, the only people who cared about him in Changyang Prefecture were Bai Yuntian, Yu Fengyan, and Changyang Mingyue. Genshin could clearly sense Yu Fengyan's feelings and the helplessness hidden within when he saw how sorrowful Yu Fengyan was. Ignoring the fact that the Ice Goddess Hall was not even on the Tianyuan continent and was extremely far away, just the frigid climate, there was enough to prevent Heaven Saint Masters from approaching. Otherwise, even a Heaven Saint Master with fire-attributed Saint Force would be frozen into a popsicle. Only Saint Rulers could survive there. Although there were over a dozen Saint Rulers and several Holy Emperors in Changyang Prefecture, all of them possessed great statuses. Even the Patriarch of Changyang Prefecture, Changyang Ba, needed to politely greet them when he saw them, let alone Yu Fengyan, who was only his wife. On the surface, Yu Fengyan was the second madam of Changyang Prefecture. She possessed a great status, but she was nothing before the people who had separated from the protector clans. Without a doubt, asking the saint rulers of Changyang Prefecture to take her to the Arctic Ice Goddess Hall with her current status was impossible. She did not even have the right to see a saint ruler. As a result, Yu Fengyan could only ask for help from Jianqin. Yu Fengyan had already begun to treat Jianqin as her savior, her only hope of seeing her daughter again. Jianqin sank into his thoughts. Although some people had escaped from the underworld sect, including a sect master who was even more powerful than Luo Qi, it was not like he could not stop them with his current strength. At the same time, he really did miss Changyang Mingyue a little after not seeing her in such a long time. Jianqin made up his mind when he thought of that. He said, "Aunt, don't be too sad. I'll make some arrangements later and take you to the Arctic Ice Goddess Hall to find her." "Really? Xiangtian, are you really going to take me to see Mingyue?" Yu Fengyan was overjoyed. She grabbed Jianqin's hand excitedly. She knew that if Jianqin did not agree, she would probably never be able to see Changyang Mingyue again unless she came back herself. Jianqin nodded. "Of course. Aunt, rest for a while first. I'll go make some arrangements right away, and then I'll take you to the Arctic Ice Goddess Hall to find her." Jianqin left the garden and made his way to the back of Changyang Prefecture. The back of Changyang Prefecture had already become a forbidden zone of the Changyang Prefecture. No guards were allowed to approach it. Even the patriarch of the Changyang Prefecture and other important figures were forbidden from entering without a notice, because this was where Changyang Zushao cultivated. Other than Changyang Zushao, even Changyang Zuyin Shao, Changyang Zuyun, and over a dozen saint rulers who had left the protector clans were gathered there. The people guarding the forbidden zone had all been replaced by the heaven saint masters who had left the protector clans. As soon as he approached the back of Changyang Prefecture, Jianqin saw 4 heaven saint masters sitting on the ground, guarding the entrance. The surroundings were silent. As soon as Jianqin arrived, the 4 heaven saint masters opened their eyes at the same time. When they recognized Jianqin, they immediately stood up and politely bowed to him. Even the patriarch of Changyang Prefecture, Changyang Ba, needed to make a report when he set foot in the back of Changyang Prefecture. However, Jianqin did not need to. He could enter and leave at any time, and no one dared to stop him. Jianqin nodded at the heaven saint masters in a friendly manner before entering the back without any obstructions. He had never seen the 4 heaven saint masters before, but he knew that they belonged to the Zhu branch of the protector clans. They had come with Changyang Zushao and the others. Jianqin had already known that the back of Changyang Prefecture had been designated as a forbidden zone. Not only did he not object to it, but he even approved of it. After all, the people who lived there were led by Changyang Zushao and Changyang Zuyin Shao. Not to mention that Changyang Zushao was a supreme expert who had almost reached great perfection as the Holy Emperor. Most importantly, Changyang Zushao and Changyang Zuyinkong had left the protector clans because they had stood up for him. As a result, Jianqin did not have any deep feelings for the 2 of them, but he respected them from the bottom of his heart. Jianqin saw Changyang Zushao in an extremely simple hall. Changyang Zuzhao's hair was white, and he seemed even older than when he had been in the protector clan. He seemed rather haggard as well. Clearly, leaving the protector clan of Changyang Prefecture had caused some trauma to Changyang Zuzhao's heart. After all, it was his home that he had lived in for several thousand years, so he had extremely deep feelings for it. Jianqin first bowed to Changyang Zushao as a junior before explaining why he had come. He had come to find Changyang Zushao, this time to make sure that the Holy Emperor of the Underworld sect would not do anything to harm Changyang Prefecture. "Xiang'er, you don't need to worry about this. I may not be able to discover the Holy Emperor who has infiltrated the kingdom of Jessen, but if a Holy Emperor enters this tiny city, he won't be able to escape my senses. The secret techniques of the protector clans that have been passed down since ancient times are not so simple. However, if the Holy Emperor of the Underworld sect decides to assassinate someone, I can only protect this city. I can't do anything about the imperial family of this small kingdom. Considering that your fiancée is a member of the imperial family and is the daughter of the king, you should have Yun Shao watch over the imperial family. Although Yun Shao is only at the 5th heavenly layer, he knows many secret techniques and abilities. Regular holy emperors are not his opponent in battle. Changyang Zhu Shao said with a smile. Changyang Zhu Shao said amiably. He valued this great-grandson of his very much, so he would always stand by Jian Chen's side and think for Jian Chen's sake. Jian Chen completely stopped worrying when he heard that. After a moment of hesitation, he asked, "Great-grandfather, may I ask how much you know about the Arctic Ice Goddess Hall?" Changyang Zhu Shao frowned slightly when he heard the mention of the Arctic Ice Goddess Hall. After a moment of silence, he said, "Everything I know about the Arctic Ice Goddess Hall comes from the ancient records in my clan. The records all come from ancient times, and they're all manuscripts left behind by my ancestor, the Holy Emperor. I only know that the Arctic Ice Goddess Hall is extremely powerful. Even the 4 sovereigns who surpassed the Holy Emperor in ancient times have never set foot in the Arctic Ice Goddess Hall. No one knows when the Ice Goddess Hall appeared, but it never interferes with the matters of the Tianyuan continent. It has never appeared on the Tianyuan continent either. As a matter of fact, no one on the Tianyuan continent knows about the existence of the Ice Goddess Hall aside from the Protector clans and Mercenary City. The sudden appearance of the Ice Goddess Hall over a decade ago was the first time in a million years. This time, it has been recorded by the Protector clans." Changyang Zhu Shao suddenly stared at Jian Chen sternly. He said with a heavy voice, "Xiang'er, do you want to go to the Arctic Ice Goddess Hall?" "That's right. My sister is in the Arctic Ice Goddess Hall. I want to go see her." Jian Chen did not deny it. Changyang Zhu Shao fell silent for a while before heavily replying, "I've never been to the Arctic Ice Goddess Hall before, but I do know that it's extremely terrifying because the records left behind by the Holy Emperor have warned the juniors more than once to never offend the Arctic Ice Goddess Hall or try to find it. There must be an extremely terrifying person in the Ice Goddess Hall. But after so many years, the person who even the Holy Emperor feared must have died long ago. Even if that's the case, I still hope that you can seriously consider it and avoid it as much as possible. Since the Ice Goddess Hall is so mysterious and powerful at the same time, why did they make my sister the Holy Maiden? I don't know if there's some scheme behind this. However, there's one thing that great-grandfather was right about. After so many years, even if there really is someone powerful in the Ice Goddess Hall, they must have died. Even if they've surpassed the Holy Emperor, it's impossible for them to live for so long. As a result, the Ice Goddess Hall is probably not as terrifying as before, so I must go," Jian Chen said. "Since you've already made up your mind, I won't stop you. However, you must be careful." Changyang Zhu Shao knew that he could not persuade Jian Chen otherwise, so he just stopped trying. Chapter 1220. The Arctic was to the north of the Tianyuan continent. It was a region that did not belong to the Tianyuan continent, separated by a vast ocean. The climate there was frigid, and the environment was terrible. Snowstorms would erupt from time to time, and even Heaven Saint Masters would not be able to avoid them. At the same time, a visible white gas filled the sky, flying past from time to time and leaving behind white streaks in the air. This was a terrifying stream of cold that was extremely active in the Arctic. It was said that even steel would be frozen into ice. The space in the Arctic was extremely unstable, so space gates were unable to connect to the icy plains. Jian Chen brought you Fengyan, newbies, Ruijin, Honglian, and Blackfish through a space gate and arrived at the ocean near the Arctic before flying toward the icy plains that could be vaguely seen. Although they had not set foot on the icy plains, the climate there was extremely cold. The sky was white while the water was bone-chillingly cold. Huge pieces of ice floated in the air. Jian Chen and the others had all reached the level of Holy Emperor, so the cold that could freeze ordinary people into popsicles did not affect them at all. Only the weaker Yu Fengyan's lips had turned white from the cold. Although she wore a thick set of snowy fox feathers, she still shivered from the cold. However, Yu Fengyan was filled with excitement, even though that was the case. As soon as she thought about how she would be able to see her daughter, Changyang Mingyue, she felt warm inside. She was willing to suffer any hardship. They set foot on the icy plains very soon. The temperature there was even lower. The cold wind whistled through the icy plains like sharp blades. Even with their strength as Holy Emperor, they still felt their skin ache. The cold wind there could easily cut Earth Saint Masters into mincemeat. Ordinary people would not be able to survive. Crack, crack. With a gentle sound, the clothes of gentian, newbies, ruijin, and black fish rapidly froze. In just a few seconds, they had become snow-white, covered in a thin layer of ice. The next moment, the four of them gently trembled, easily dispersing the ice and snow on them. Their faces remained the same as before, completely ignoring the cold. Yu Fengyan had already arrived beside Honglian. Waves of heat radiated from Honglian, causing the streams of coldness to turn into nothingness before they could even approach Honglian. "Senior Honglian, please take care of my aunt," Jianqin said to Honglian. Honglian was a scorching divine phoenix, the sovereign of fire. With her by her side, even an ordinary person like Yu Fengyan would not be harmed. Honglian nodded slightly. She pulled Yu Fengyan with one hand as they advanced through the icy plains. The waves of heat from her were warm and gentle. Not only did they not harm Yu Fengyan, but they even made her feel like she was bathing in sunlight. They flew at a low altitude over the hazy, icy plains, directly heading to the depths. As they ventured deeper, the temperature became colder and colder. The frigid winds could threaten Heaven Saint Masters, unless they were fire-attributed Heaven Saint Masters. Even sixth cycle Heaven Saint Masters would be cut to pieces by the frigid winds that were as sharp as blades. White streams of coldness would sweep across the icy plains from time to time, turning a Heaven Saint Master into a popsicle in a single moment. They flew through the Arctic icy plains for 7 days before officially entering the depths. The coldness forced Jianqin and newbies to face it head-on. A faint layer of energy enveloped them while ruijin and black fish constantly formed 3-inch thick ice crystals on their bodies before shattering them. In just a few seconds, they would be covered by another 3-inch thick layer of ice before shattering it again. This repeated for several days. Yu Fengyan was enveloped by a layer of flames, so she was not affected at all. After arriving in the depths of the icy plains, just the waves of heat from Honglian were no longer enough to fend off the cold streams. At this moment, the icy plains suddenly began to violently gust with a ghostly wail. A large, white stream of coldness shot toward Jianqin's group from up ahead. "Be careful!" Jianqin called out and immediately used the illusory flash to dodge. Newbies, ruijin, and black fish did not dare to be careless either. They all began to dodge the white stream of coldness. Red Lotus let out a low roar, and the flames on her body soared into the sky. The blazing flames emitted a terrifyingly high temperature that enveloped her and Yu Fengyan. This kind of temperature could melt steel in a breath's time, but it could only protect a 1-meter radius around them. Honglian's control over fire had already reached the acme of perfection. She could control the temperature of the flames as she wished. Yu Fengyan did not feel the heat at all when the terrifying flames enveloped her. Instead, she felt extremely warm and was unable to harm her at all. The wave of coldness passed very quickly. Jianqin, Blackfish, and ruijin successfully dodged it. However, Newbies was struck by the final stream of coldness. Although the stream of coldness was only the size of a fist, it possessed unbelievable power. Newbies was instantly frozen into a popsicle after being struck by the fist-sized white stream of coldness. A powerful golden light radiated from Newbies' body. The frozen newbies was unable to move at all and was currently attacking the popsicle with all his might. The popsicle let out a slight cracking sound. Even with the strength of the Holy Emperor newbies at the third celestial layer, he was actually unable to shatter the ice in a short amount of time. Jianqin took a step forward and arrived before newbies in an instant. He directly punched the popsicle. With a muffled sound, Jianqin's full-powered punch actually failed to shatter the popsicle. Only a small crack appeared on it. Jianqin's expression did not change. He had already experienced the power of the coldness in the depths of the ice field. Without saying anything, he immediately threw a second punch. Bam! With a muffled sound, the crack on newbies' popsicle expanded once more and spread out like a spider web. Jianqin threw a third punch. After 3 punches, the ice that froze newbies finally shattered under the cooperation of the two. Newbies, who had regained his freedom, emitted a cold aura. His face was already pale from the cold. He couldn't help but shiver and say, "So cold. I, the great newbies, am going to die from the cold. Be careful. Next time don't move and get frozen. The coldness in this place is too terrifying." If it was an ordinary holy emperor at the third celestial layer, without help from the outside, they wouldn't be able to break free from the bindings of the ice at all. They would only be frozen to death. Jianqin's expression was very serious. The Arctic ice field was far more terrifying than what he had expected. Right now, their current location was already dangerous enough to threaten the Holy Emperor. Everyone advanced once more. For hours later, they had advanced another 1,000 kilometers. None of them could resist the coldness with just their bodies. A barrier of energy appeared around all of them. They were much more careful now. Even Ruijin's trio did not dare to be careless. Jianqin was even prepared to send Yu Fengyan into the artifact space at any time. This was because the dangers here were already enough to threaten them. After crossing an iceberg, Jianqin's group narrowed their eyes. 1,000 meters in front of them, several human-shaped ice sculptures appeared before their eyes. The group arrived in front of the human-shaped ice sculptures. The ice sculptures were very lifelike, and they could clearly see the faces of the human-shaped ice sculptures. Each ice sculpture was making different movements, and one of the human-shaped ice sculptures had a clear look of fear in its eyes. In addition, each of the ice sculptures here faintly emitted a pressure that made one tremble in fear. Ruijin, Honglian, Blackfish, Jianqin, and newbies gradually became stern. They were all stern. With their knowledge, they could obviously tell that the ice sculptures were not made from ice. Instead, they were living people that had been frozen. These people were all experts of the Holy Emperor when they were alive. Ruijin said with a heavy voice. He was extremely stern. The Holy Emperor was already an existence that stood at the apex of the Tianyuan continent, yet such a powerful figure had actually been frozen. This was an extremely great shock to them. Their strength when they were alive was even greater than the Holy Emperor. No, they're even more powerful than human sacred grounds, Honglian said with a heavy voice. The Holy Emperor she was referring to was naturally the path, Lord of carnal desires. Jianqin shivered inside. He had already known that the Ice Goddess Hall was very powerful. He had even placed them in an extremely terrifying position. However, only now did he discover that they were still far more terrifying than he had imagined. "There's more up ahead," Newbies cried out as he pointed ahead in disbelief. With that, everyone turned around and saw 5 huge magical beasts appear 10 kilometers away. They had also been frozen into lifelike ice sculptures. Chapter 1221. The group then arrived in front of the Class 9 magical beasts that had been frozen into ice sculptures. These Class 9 magical beasts were extremely large. Up close, they looked like buildings. 3 of the magical beasts looked like tigers or leopards. They were 10 meters tall and 50 to 60 meters long. The 4th one was a giant python with 2 heads. Its coiled body was 3 meters thick. The 5th magical beast was a mutated beast of antiquity that they did not know the name of. Its 2 huge wings were unfurled, covering a radius of several hundred meters. The last magical beast was 100-meter tall war behemoth. It carried a large white bone club on its shoulder. Although it had been frozen into an ice sculpture, a wild aura could still be felt from its body. Jianqin and newbies looked at each other. Their eyes were filled with shock. They had already been shocked when they saw the frozen humans, but they had never thought that there would be 6 more frozen Class 9 magical beasts. Class 9 magical beasts were peak experts on the same level as Saint Emperors. Even in ancient times, Class 9 magical beasts and Saint Emperors were existences that stood at the apex of the pyramid aside from the 4 experts who had surpassed Saint Emperor. They dominated an entire region. Yet, so many Holy Emperor and Class 9 magical beasts had actually been frozen to death on the icy plains. This was an extremely great shock to Jianqin and the others. Since when had the Holy Emperor become so weak? They had actually died from the cold. If this matter made its way to the Tianyuan continent, it would definitely be explosive news. It would be enough to shake up all the experts on the continent. However, this also reflected the terror and power of the Arctic ice goddess Hul. The Holy Emperor is a peak expert on the Tianyuan continent. No matter what their status was before they died, they should be treated with respect. I'll go retrieve the bodies of the Holy Emperor and bring them back to the Tianyuan continent for a proper burial, Jianqin said in a sorrowful voice. He also felt sorrow for the miserable fates of the Holy Emperor. The mighty Holy Emperor had actually been frozen to death in a world of ice and snow. Probably not many people had suffered such a miserable fate throughout history. Jianqin arrived before the ice statues of the Holy Emperor. He wanted to collect the bodies into his space ring and bring them back to the Tianyuan continent for a proper burial. Unfortunately, the ice on the Holy Emperor had already fused with the ground, so he could not remove them. Without any hesitation, Jianqin pulled out his emperor armament and swung it at the ground. The toughness of the ice far exceeded what Jianqin had imagined. He only managed to create a shallow crack after swinging his sword a few times as hard as he could. After swinging his sword over 100 times, the ice around the Holy Emperor finally separated from the ground. However, at this moment, a series of cracking sounds rang out. A crack suddenly appeared on the ice around the Holy Emperor. It expanded at an unbelievable rate, covering his entire body in just a few seconds. Bang! With a gentle sound, the body of the Holy Emperor shattered. There was no blood. His body had been reduced to a pile of ice. Jianqin was stunned. He stared blankly at the Holy Emperor, who had been reduced to a pile of ice. He could not help but sigh inside. A mighty Holy Emperor had actually ended up like this in the end. Jianqin did not touch the bodies of the other Holy Emperor. He returned to the ice statues of the Class 9 magical beasts. After a moment of hesitation, he directly leapt up and swung his sword at the head of one of the magical beasts. After several dozen swings, Jianqin finally cut off the head of the magical beast. As soon as the head, which was the size of a water tank, fell onto the ice, it shattered with a thump, turning into a pile of ice. Crack! 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 In the next moment, cracks rapidly spread across the headless body. Very soon, the enormous body of the magical beast was reduced to a pile of ice as well. Jianqin searched through the ice for a while, but did not find a complete Class 9 magical core. He only found a few fragments of the magical core that had also been reduced to ice. The energy within them had completely dissipated. They were no longer of any use. Jianqin was disappointed. He already knew that the frozen Class 9 magical beasts were of no value. Not only that, their bodies were the same as the human Holy Emperors. Otherwise, they would all shatter into a pile of ice. Even their space rings were the same. These Holy Emperors and Class 9 magical beasts' bodies have been dead for far too long. Their bodies have been completely assimilated by the ice and snow here. Their flesh and blood have all turned into ice. Ruijin sighed softly. His heart was heavy. They've been dead for several 100,000 years at the very least, Newbie said. Let's keep going, Jianqin called out to everyone. He ignored the ice statues and continued onward. As they ventured deeper, they discovered many more ice statues, humans, beasts, and beasts. However, all of them were at the level of Holy Emperor without any exception. None of them were below the level of Holy Emperor. This place is far too terrifying. We've already discovered over 30 Holy Emperors and Class 9 magical beasts' frozen bodies. Newbie's voice trembled slightly. He had already developed a sliver of fear towards this place. This place was basically the burial ground of Holy Emperor experts. An hour later, they traveled another 500 kilometers. The temperature had dropped even lower now. Jianqin and Newbies were already doing their best to fend off the cold. Jianqin had also sent Eufonian into the artifact space. Even Ruijin, Heiyu, and Heiyu had donned their origin energy armor. There's another fallen expert here, Newbies pointed up ahead. It was an extremely burly man who sat on the ice. His eyes were closed, and he had lost all signs of life long ago. There's another line of words here, Jianqin said softly. Beside the man was a line of words carved into the ice. This king is Erton. I am invincible across the world. I have been alone for several hundred years, unable to break through to the origin realm from the Holy Emperor level. I learned about the mysterious Ice Goddess Hall from ancient records, so I came in search of it. However, I was frozen to death before I could even see it. This king refuses to accept this. This king refuses to accept this. Chapter 1222. Jianqin was shocked when he heard that. He carefully studied the frozen, middle-aged man again and felt extremely shocked. Even the ruler of the beast god continent, Erton, who had reached the peak of Holy Emperor and was only a step away from Holy Emperor, peerless origin realm, had been frozen to death here. Jianqin was even more shocked by this than when he had seen the statues of over 30 Holy Emperors and Class 9 magical beasts. Peak Holy Emperors were far more powerful than regular Holy Emperors. The difference was like the difference between a 9th Heavenly Layer Saint Ruler and a 1st Heavenly Layer Saint Ruler, the difference between a Great Perfection Holy Emperor and a Great Perfection Holy Emperor. Although they were at the same level of cultivation, the difference in strength was extremely great. Not only was Erton a peak Holy Emperor expert, but he was also a beast of antiquity. His battle prowess far surpassed peak Holy Emperor human experts. It would not even be an exaggeration to call him the strongest below the origin realm. However, even someone as powerful as Erton had been frozen to death. Not only did Jianqin and Newbies shiver inside, but even Ruijin, Honglian, and Blackfish felt the same. 500,000 years ago, Erton was invincible. No one could do anything to him. Yet he was actually sent to his death on the icy plains. He did not die in battle. This place is just too terrifying, Newbies said in shock. Newbies said in shock. He shivered inside. After seeing Erton's corpse, his fear of the icy plains became even more intense. It was not just Newbies. Even Jianqin felt a sliver of fear. The icy plains were just too terrifying. Just the cold was enough to freeze a Holy Emperor to death. It was no wonder that the ancestor of the Protector clans, the Holy Emperor, feared the Ice Goddess Hall so much. Ruijin, Honglian, and Blackfish looked at each other. They became extremely stern. Even when they faced a Holy Emperor, they did not show such a stern expression. Newbies bowed deeply at Erton's corpse before continuing on with Jianqin and the others. They did not touch Erton's body. They did not even touch the space ring on Erton's finger. With their previous experience, they knew that after so many years, both Erton's body and the space ring had been assimilated by the ice here. Once the layer of ice on Erton's body was destroyed, the space ring would be destroyed. If they destroyed the surface of the ice, Erton's entire body and space ring would be reduced to a pile of shards. Everyone's hearts became very heavy when they saw Erton's fate. They remained silent for the rest of the journey. They maintained a straight line as they continued on. After traveling 100 kilometers, Nubes, who was the weakest, could no longer last any longer. He was sent back into the artifact space by Jianchen. If it were not for the fact that Jianchen possessed the chaotic body and cultivated chaotic force, he probably would not have been able to last until now. The coldness there had reached an extremely terrifying level. It could even freeze the saint force of a holy emperor. Ruijin, Heiyu, and Heiyu were only able to travel so easily because of their supreme strength and the protection of their origin energy armor. However, Jianchen and the others also knew that the coldness there was far too weak compared to several 100,000 years ago. Otherwise, it would have been impossible for them to travel any further than Erton with the strength of their holy emperor. They would have been reduced to lifelike statues before they even saw the holy emperor's statues. Afterwards, they advanced for another half a day. However, the 5 of them had only advanced 250 kilometers during that time. In the end, they were blocked by a boundless cold mist. The cold mist was like a natural barrier, blocking their path forward. This mist is not simple. The 4 of them stopped. Honglian stared at the mist up ahead and said with a deep voice, it did not make sense for mist to exist in such a terrifyingly cold environment. Mist was formed from water, but it was impossible for water to exist in this place because all the water had been frozen into ice that was tougher than steel. You stay here for now. I'll go in and have a look, said Heiyu. Her flames swelled as the scorching godfire hairpin appeared in her hand. She then carefully made her way into the region of cold mist. As soon as Honglian set foot in the mist, her flames came in contact with the mist and immediately produced hissing sounds. However, the mist was far more terrifying than they had imagined. Honglian lasted for less than a second before the flames around her were completely suppressed by the mist. In the second breath, the flames were completely suppressed by the mist. The mist rapidly approached the surface of Honglian's body, causing her fire-red wings to become covered in a thin layer of white ice. Honglian was shocked. She already knew that the cold mist was not simple, but she did not expect it to be so terrifying. She no longer stayed behind. Immediately, a white flame surged out from the raging flames godfire heavenly hairpin and enveloped her in a flash. The white flames were incomparable to the red flames. As soon as the white flames appeared, they immediately melted the ice on Honglian's body. Even the mist in the surroundings was forced back by 10 meters. Honglian let out a sigh of relief. Afterwards, she used the scorching godfire hairpin to protect herself as she carefully advanced. However, the coldness would double with every centimeter of the mist. When Honglian took her first step, the mist that had been forced back by the white flames had shrunk to 2.5 feet. When she took her second step, the mist had already shrunk to 2 feet. When she took her third step, the mist had shrunk to 1.5 feet. When she took her fourth step, the mist was only a foot away from Honglian. Honglian gently sighed as she stared at the white mist that seemed to have no end. She carefully retreated. She knew that if she took her fifth step, the mist would approach her and freeze her into an ice statue. Even with the scorching godfire hairpin, she would not be able to protect herself. You must have seen it as well. The mist is even more terrifying than we imagined it to be. Even I can only take a few steps. We can't pass through it at all. Honglian said, rather dejectedly. She was the sovereign of fire, so she was able to counter the ice. However, when she drew out her origin energy weapon, she could not even pass through the mist. She was unable to cheer up at all. Jianchen frowned. He had obviously seen how terrifying the mist was, but it was like a barrier that blocked their path. It was boundless. If they could not pass through it, they would have to stop here, let alone find the ice goddess hall. At the same time, in a secret room made of ice, a woman who looked to be about 20 years old was sitting cross-legged on a piece of white mysterious ice and cultivating. The woman was extremely beautiful. She was so beautiful that she outshone the moon and flowers. Her entire body was snow white. Not only was her hair white, but even her eyebrows and eyelashes were white. The woman was the second young lady of Chanyang Prefecture, Chanyang Mingyue, who had left many years ago. Suddenly, Chanyang Mingyue opened her eyes. Her face was filled with joy as she excitedly said, "Brother, it's my brother. I can see him." With that, Chanyang Mingyue leapt off the profound ice and quickly ran out of the room as a white blur. This was a room completely composed of ice and snow. All the decorations in the room were condensed from ice crystals. They were crystal clear and very beautiful. Although this room was very beautifully decorated, it was snow white. Other than white, there was only white. Moreover, the temperature in the room had reached an inconceivable level. Compared to the temperature in the room, an ice cavern that had lasted for 10,000 years was like a volcano. And on an ice bed in this room, a person wearing silver-white armor was sitting cross-legged with his eyes closed. Her armor covered her entire body as she sat on the bed. Only her eyes were exposed, so her appearance was impossible to see. At this moment, the door to the room was violently pushed open. Chanyang Mingyue ran in with her bare feet in joy. She hurriedly said, "Protector Shui, I can see my brother. I can see my brother. My brother has come over. He's currently blocked by the profound ice chi. Let him in quickly." Chanyang Mingyue's voice was filled with excitement. Perhaps it was because she was too happy, but a faint blush appeared on her pale face. Protector Shui slowly opened her eyes. She could not help but gently sigh when she saw how excited Chanyang Mingyue was. She said, "Your Majesty, are you still unable to forget them?" Protector Shui did not just refer to Jianqin by them. She also referred to all the people related to Chanyang Mingyue in Chanyang Prefecture. Chanyang Mingyue became furious and said, "Protector Shui, I can't forget my brother. He will always be my brother. Let him in quickly."